Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and we've decided on Tuesdays, we're going to have Tuesdays with Tim. Tim is going to be the basically sort of like we're at Tim's house. We're around in his living room, around his fireplace, and we're just having like a fireside chat. And but also we've invited Rob Tobler to share some things, and he's going to sort of lead the discussion. And so I'll turn the time over to Rob, and we'll just let you start, Rob, what your idea was about these documents.
Well, thank you. On the subreddit, a poster by the name of Sticky Hair Monster posted a very popular post entitled 10 Damning Documents the Mormon Church Would Like to See Buried. And so I'm excited to be here today with a real historian, a real ex-apologist, and to discuss, are these the right documents that should be in the top 10? And so without any further ado, let's get into them. Gene, can you show us the first document?
Look at that. We're on the bottom now.
Okay, so this is the papyri for the Book of Abraham translation, which at one time we believed was lost in a fire. But in 1966, it was found. Tim, what is your experience with this document? And do you think it merits being one of the 10 damning documents, and why?
I think it's the number one damning document. My experience, well, the first time I saw it was in my copy of the Pearl of Great Price. And then the dialogue article, and Nibley's book, the Joseph Smith Papyri and the Egyptian Endowment, and then the dialogue article, and then dialogue printed it again with a slightly different translation. I think it was 20 years later or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in 1912, whatever was in the Pearl of Great Price, or however they got it, the New York Times had an article that said Joseph Smith was a fraud because he mistranslated all these things. But in 1912, it was very easy for the church to say, don't pay attention to those anti-Mormon lies, cancel your subscription to the New York Times, and buy a subscription to the, what's the Salt Lake?
Ensign.
The Deseret.
Salt Lake Tribune.
Yeah, whatever they owned at the time, they probably just said, just look at that newspaper and cancel your New York Times subscription. But nowadays, it's plastered all over the internet, and so they can't really do that anymore, except for having a social media fast or trusted sources, right? They're saying.
Right.
And so, Brother Jones, what do you think about this?
I would agree with, I definitely would agree that it's a critical one. I will just simply say that the issue of the Book of Abraham was a major issue when I learned about this. In fact, I had bought this book 10 years ago, and I, you know how you buy books and you never get to the end of them. That was the case with this book. I never got to the end of it because the last chapter has information about the discoveries of 66, 67. And this book tells the story of the papyri and how they got to Joseph Smith's hands.
Sure.
So anyway, yeah, it's absolutely.
Did we hear from the backyard professor yet?
Pardon?
Carrie, why is this
backyard professor on this?
Why is the picture damning? That's proof Joseph Smith knew what he was doing. Are you kidding me? Yeah, this is without question the number one. This is the smoking gun, and I know that offends Mormons, and we don't apologize, because unlike the Book of Mormon gold plates that we don't have and we can't check, we do have the original papyri. Joseph Smith made the biggest blunder, and we're very grateful that he had such an ego that he kept all of his work on this. What he should have done is literally destroyed everything after he did his translation. But he couldn't quite prophetically see that far into the future. But yes, the reason this is damning is numerous. I believe it was when I read Dan Vogel's book on this, the apologist's argument, and then the book by Robert Rittner. Those two were the ones that clarified this entire issue for me. And this is the issue. I mean, I fancied myself a good apologist in the day, using the apologetic arguments to defend this stuff. And it was thanks to Dan Vogel and Robert Rittner that they added clarity that the apologists, I discovered, were muddying the waters. And so this is without question the number one document the church wishes it could get rid of.
Yeah, for me, when I came across the Joseph Smith papers, where I saw in a revelation that Joseph's first gift was to, he had the gift to translate, and that he should pretend to no other gift. This document is the way to definitively put him to the test and verify or vindicate that he has that gift. Sadly, he fails miserably. So I think it definitely deserves to be in the top 10.
Now, the interesting thing about that is when it was brought back to the church in 1967, the expectation was the same as those gentlemen in 1912. That's why they said, hey, we don't have the originals. All you're going off is copies. Therefore, your argument doesn't hold water. And in that regard, the church was correct. But when these originals came forward, the church fully expected to go get Egyptologists and translate this and show Joseph Smith got it right. It was only when it didn't turn out to be the Book of Abraham that all of the apologetic theories, there's like, what, 8 or 9 of them now? We wouldn't even have that situation with the missing scroll theory or the by revelation theory, or we wouldn't have all these various theories if this thing just translated into the Book of Abraham like
That's
the
right.
church expected.
Yeah.
Signed, sealed, and delivered. Well, Diamond Dave, do you know
Hi.
about the Book of Abraham?
So I don't. I'm going to just weigh in with kind of the outsider's perspective. For you guys who don't know me, I joined the church about 4 years ago, been inactive roughly about half of that on and off. From an outsider's perspective, right? Like if you guys were to just show me this, tell me nothing, what does this look like to me? This looks kind of like more like a burial ritual, right? Because you got the what presumably is nobility being mummified. You got the sarcophagus things there, and then you have the stuff on the right, which, I mean, I'm no Egyptologist, but my guess is it's either an instruction manual on how to do a mummy or some type of ritual prayer that would be done throughout, similar to other death rituals. So I don't know if that necessarily ties into like Mormonism at all, but to me, this just looks like somebody being mummified.
Yeah, so Joseph Smith had somebody purchase this scroll along with some other mummies and some other things from a traveling sort of salesperson / museum, and proceeded to translate it into the Book of Abraham. And so for 150 years, the church said, whatever Joseph Smith saw became the Book of Abraham because it was written by Abraham's hand, and that's just it. And now that it has come out to be the burial documentation for Hor, that's the name of the person on the table.
Oh, wait, I was right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I've never read the Book of Abraham, but I'm like, to me, this is like a burial
now,
thing.
that is cool. That is
It's pretty. Diamond Dave had my jaw was almost dropping when he was describing that. And so anyway, so recently they've had to backtrack on that it was an actual translation, and now they're just saying it inspired Joseph to write new scripture that apparently doesn't exist anymore, but put it on the lips of Abraham. And so there's a word for people in the past that wrote things like a part of Deuteronomy, I think. No, Isaiah, I mean, where additional people say, hey, I have found more writings of Isaiah, and they come so far late that people call it, what do they call it, Backyard Professor?
Deutero Isaiah. There's three
Pseudo
Isaiah.
Isaiah.
Pseudepigrapha.
Pseudepigrapha, yeah.
Yes, it's pseudepigrapha, where you put your words as if some famous prophet says it, and then it gives it more gravitas, we'll say, right?
Yeah,
So Joseph Smith basically created a bunch of prophets at various times, according to ex-Mormons.
And the great historian Richard Bushman has called this pseudepigrapha. I'm not so sure he recognized what he was making it by labeling it that, but that's damning. That pseudepigrapha
Very
is
damning.
not scripture.
And Radio Free Mormon, Mormonism Live, Mormon Stories, Backyard Professor, all those shows have done shows on the Book of Abraham and different things like that at various times.
Yeah.
And so we recommend everybody to go to that. So you're ready for
Hey,
slide number 2?
Gene, can I ask you
Yeah.
a quick question? I know
Yes.
we're recording. Sorry to butt in. I'm seeing a button up here. Stream this to your audience.
Yeah, stream it.
Can I
Press it.
stream this to my audience?
Go for it.
Yes.
Do it. We'll see what happens.
I wish I'd known this. I'd have wanted to.
Yeah,
start-
I was going to say it at first, but we started saying hi and stuff. So go ahead, stream it to your audience, and we'll let you welcome everybody to your show right now.
I apologize for interrupting it. You can cut this out, can't you?
No,
We're
we're leaving
live.
it in.
Yeah, it's live.
It's
It's
rolling.
okay.
Yeah,
We're all
streaming.
learning.
What- This is my world now. Welcome to my world. This is there's no going back.
All right,
Go
that's
back.
all right.
Yeah, so welcome everybody to your show, Backyard Professor. If you press the button and say stream.
Okay, here we go. I've got it. Yeah, it's public. Schedule for later. No, don't schedule for later. Do it right now. Saving. I have no idea if it does it on mine or not, but it clicked.
We can let Tim just call the election right now as well.
There you
Put
go.
that
Here's
behind
your
us.
chance.
So I'm showing that it is streaming on your channel now.
I'm
Aaron.
not going to touch that one.
It is streaming.
It is streaming. And so
Oh,
Yep,
okay.
you're
welcome
streaming
everybody to your
live.
show. And
I wanna
what
welcome-
we're doing here.
I'm not going to touch that one.
It is streaming.
Oh, you're gonna have to mute one of the tabs for
Oh,
the
I'm
echo.
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to mute mine.
No,
Yeah. No,
Yeah, just mute one. You just have to mute one. That's all you got to do.
I don't see you guys anymore, though.
I know. Just welcome everybody to your show.
Okay,
then
everybody,
what we've been
welcome.
doing.
We are doing a live stream with a group of us. That's what this is. We're in the middle of it. We're just talking. There we are. The gang of 6. We are just talking about 10 very interesting, damning documents that Mormonism wishes it could destroy. We just finished talking about facsimile number 1, this one right here. We've all agreed more or less that this is the smoking gun. I'm not misrepresenting any of you by saying that, am I, gentlemen?
Well, maybe me, but I don't know what's going on. So
It's okay,
I'm a
Diamond
new
Dave.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah, Diamond Dave.
I'm learning things. Let's put
It's
it
a
that way.
smoking water
I'll
pistol.
tell you what,
Diamond Dave.
you shocked us beautifully with your complete. Please do not be offended about how I'm about to put this, but Diamond Dave has never read the Book of Abraham. He has never hardly seen this stuff, and in his ignorance, he got it right what this is, and he doesn't know anything about Egyptian. So this
Well, I'd
is
say he might know something.
Well, I will say I did study, like, as a kid. I did love, like, the Egyptian history books, but it's been years, right? So it's like I haven't fully read the Book of Mormon. I haven't read the Book of Abraham. I've heard of it. I don't know what it is. I'm more fluent with foreign cultures, and just with my job and who I am, I just look for patterns and kind of piece together what things could be that make logical sense. That's how I operate. So,
you.
That's
All
right.
right, so we're letting Rob Rob
Yeah.
Tobler is here. Gene Judson, Brother Jones, Tim Rathbone, our beloved Diamond Dave, and myself. And tonight is Rob Tobler's night to lead the discussion. And this is the first document, so I'll turn it back over to him. Thanks for letting me interject, Gene. I appreciate it. So,
Yeah.
okay.
All right, our next document is a rather new document in comparison to the Book of Abraham, papyri, which is thousands of years old. This document is the protocol that the church's risk management, in conjunction with Curtin McConkie Law Firm, uses for handling abuse calls from bishops. It's the helpline. It's the checklist of how to handle these calls about abuse. I think as a parent who's had children that have been abused, this document is extremely damning. And the 2 points I would bring is that nowhere on the document does it advise the bishop to let the parents or other ward members know that there is a predator in your midst. The second thing at the bottom of the document, it says, and I'm going to quote, personnel should never advise a priesthood leader to report abuse. Counsel of this nature should only come from legal counsel. Tim, what do you think of this document?
It's very damning that they don't tell people to call the police, that their first instinct is to call Curtin McConkie and talk to them. Now, I had experience with this. I had a son that was molested by another member's child, and I called the police. I don't know if this was before or after this hotline was set up, but I called the police and told them they need to go talk to this kid's family. And there was abuse going on in the family that's been going on for years that they were hiding. And I got in trouble from the bishop for not talking to him about it first. And then when I was either elders quorum president or executive secretary, I called about a member of our ward who was being abused. But I don't think I went to Curtin McConkie back when it first started, because I was talking to somebody in the church office building. And I explained to them what was going on. This brother held a shotgun to his wife's head and told them what was going on. And they told me, well, are you a bishop? They want to know what my position was. I said, no, but the bishop told me to call you guys. Well, tell the bishop to call us. I said, all right, fine. So I told the bishop about it. And I don't know if he called him or not, but that was my experience with it. Yeah.
Every time the church makes a statement about abuse, they lead with the phrase, protecting children is our number one priority. And I think this document proves that mitigating liability is their priority over caring for victims, especially child victims. Someone pointed out that the font used for this document is Comic Sans, what would be used in a comic strip, as if this abuse was a joke. Any other thoughts? Anyone else with experience?
Yeah.
I don't have a direct experience with this document. However, I will say that all of the revelations that have come out about this issue the past 5 or 10 years, right? In fact, the whole Boy Scout bankruptcy thing, I was completely unaware of that until, I don't know, about 7 years ago. 6 or 7 years ago, I was completely unaware of that. And discussing this actually just brought to mind a story that happened in my mission when a member of the mission presidency was I don't know how they deal with international cases, but I found out later that, yeah, this person was excommunicated because of sexual abuse issues. And of course, nobody knew anything about that. But I do remember picking up a General Authority 70 from the airport who came in to deal with the issue, which I didn't know why we were picking him up. But anyway, let me just say this one thing. To me, it is so obvious to me now how much damage has happened in this Mormon culture due to whatever you want to call it, polygamy or sexual purity issues, sexual repression, whatever. To me, it is a very common theme in the Mormon experience that people have dealt with this kind of problem throughout their lives. It's just everywhere. That's my point.
Yeah.
Well, Tim Kossoff says that the church is the most pernicious organization on the face of the earth for child abuse, worse than the Catholics.
Yeah,
Because
those
they
are
hide
very
things.
interesting interviews that he did. I highly recommend those. He's the guy that's been prosecuting these cases for like 25 years or so. Yeah,
That's right.
Kossoff.
He's been on Mormon Stories, and there was a documentary about the Boy Scouts a year ago that I saw on, I don't know, Netflix or whatever, and that was very telling. And so so the fact that they're really not doing anything for the victims or the potential victims in wards, protecting people.
When did this come out? What year?
About 95, I think, 96.
So this has been their protocol for decades.
Well, I
How
don't know
big-
about that. This is from Kurt McConkie, and like I said, when I called it, it did not go to Kurt McConkie. It went to somebody in the church office building.
Right.
Oh,
Dave, do you have something?
Well, I had a couple things just for clarification, because Brother Jones brought up the international aspect, and that's what I'm more kind of fluent in. And Tim mentioned that this came out roughly 95, 96 approximately. How big internationally was the church in that era, first of all?
Probably
Does
10
anyone
million
know?
members.
But okay,
When did they announce that more than 50% of the members lived outside of the U.S.? Wasn't that about 20 years ago?
That was about 20 years ago, yeah.
Yeah.
2004. Okay, just because the reason why I'm asking, to me, I would agree this looks like a liability aspect, but also just from my lens, it looks like policies and procedures of what to do should this happen. And because the church is international, I don't know, maybe you guys can help clarify this for me, but as of now, it kind of comes off like it's very generic and kept internal, because there are many different state laws that will vary based on location. And then there's also international laws that one has to account for. And if that nation has multiple states within it, you're dealing with the federal and the state in that area as well with international law. So I don't know. I don't know enough to say whether or not this is damning specifically, but I would like to know if this is like actually designed to be a generic approach that can be used anywhere on the earth, or if there's something more to it just because of the lack of experience.
I think each country has their own number to call.
Oh, they do? Interesting.
Yeah.
wow.
So I'll say one
I-
thing, that the church's population membership was 5 million in 1982. 15 years later, it had doubled to 10 million by 1997. And 25 years after that, it has gone up 70% to 17 million.
See, when
2022.
this happened, I was working with Easter Seals, and I was a mandated reporter, and they taught us all about that. And
Interesting.
I would add that
yeah,
even today, regardless of how many members are outside of the U.S., the power and financial might of the church is all in the U.S. It's like 90% in the U.S. That's
Right.
really what they're concerned about. Internet. If the church got shut down in Cambodia or in Philippines would be a problem. That's 700,000.
Or like
Some of these
India.
small countries,
India.
they really don't do it. India is still very small membership in India.
It's about 25,000, 25 to 30,000, according to my
Right.
sources in
They
India.
could disappear and nothing would change in the church.
No,
No.
that's true.
Well,
Um,
I'm sure that much has changed since there has been all these lawsuits paid out and all this public scrutiny. But to the members watching this video right now, I would ask you this. If a child in your ward was abused, do you know for sure that you would be informed of it and that authorities would be notified? If you can't answer definitively, yes, absolutely, there's still a problem and there's still work to do.
I guess I'm kind of blessed because with Rob's question, I went to a mid-singles ward that also, it's like one building with multiple wards that use it. And we actually, I will say that they're very good, great people. There's several combat veterans that are there, and all I will say is they would deal with it themselves. They would deal with it themselves. But yeah, it is interesting. I do have a question for Brother Jones, just because I'm kind of new to the culture, and you brought up the polygamy and things like that. You're in Thailand, correct? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so just you're familiar with Southeast Asian cultures as well. You're probably also familiar with Islam. So I'm kind of curious as to why this would be a problem in the LDS church. From what I'm hearing, it's a problem and I'm seeing more evidence of it. However, in countries and cultures that have polygamy or even child marriage, the level of abuse is not that high, if that makes sense. And I'm wondering where the disconnect is.
I would say the disconnect relates to purity culture in Western civilization.
Okay.
There's the issues surrounding modesty and purity are quite different in Buddhism. Islam, I'm familiar with Islam, but Islam definitely has issues. Just go read about the oppression of women in Islam.
In Iran, especially, yeah.
Oh, yeah. However, there are areas where Islam exists that's not as oppressive, like Thailand.
Part of the problem, I'll say, with the Mormon Church is that they claim that they have the power of discernment because of the priesthood, and God has picked the bishops and the other leaders in the ward, and so that becomes then confusing when the bishops or whatever other leaders that the bishop even picks, how they could be evil, wicked people that do bad things, even though God told them to go ahead and pick those people for those positions. So that's, if you didn't have that claim, then it wouldn't be as bad, because it'd be like, well, what is society, right? What it's the same as society.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing.
True.
So ready to go to number 3?
Yes, we've got one more modern document, and then we're going to get to some older restoration documents. All right, what we're looking at right here is Henry B. Eyring's pay stub, or his stipend, his modest stipend stub from 1999, which appeared on Mormon WikiLeaks sometime after, and it confirms how much the top 15 general authorities are earning. What is the problem with this? Well,
in 1999.
Yeah, 1999.
In 1999, today's estimates are that they receive in pay and benefits and perks about $240,000 per year. The problem that I see with this document is that just its existence shows us that the church is not transparent and that common consent is dead. Tim, what are your thoughts?
It's disgusting. I knew that they were getting paid because they sat on until, was it Hinckley ended that they sat on board of directors of different companies in Utah. And when I saw this, I was blown away. They get paid a lot more than I thought they would. But by the time I saw this document, I already knew that they were making a lot of money. I have a friend whose cousin is a general authority, and they were poor, and then all of a sudden his wife could afford diamond rings and all fast cars and all this stuff, upper class people got. And so he was getting paid. He's a 70, I think, and he was getting paid really well. And they went from the poorhouse to the rich house in like a year after he was called.
Mhm.
So, I mean, they can do better with their money. These just disgust me. But they lie. They say they aren't paid, and they're paid like there was an article in the Wall Street Journal back in the 90s.
Lay ministry. We have a lay ministry.
Lay ministry, yeah. Anyway.
That's okay.
That statement was in the missionary discussions for some time. That
Yes, it was. I taught it on my mission in Missouri.
Mission presidents get paid. 70 get paid. Anybody who's a general authority gets paid. And mission presidents.
Yeah.
My mission
You have more to
president.
say, Brother Jones?
I was just going to mention. Go ahead, Tim. Go ahead.
Worked for DI, and then they called him as a mission president, and we went back to work for the DI in Provo. That's where I used to see him when I lived in Provo. Anyway.
I was just going to add that D. Michael Quinn's last book before he died was about Mormon corporate power.
Yeah.
And it's primarily just reviewing all of the documents and statistical aggregation that he did about the
finances
financials
of the church,
that and specific people. Okay. And it is plainly obvious to see that the top leaders of the church were not just church leaders. They were economic, they were business leaders. They were, it's a business. It is a business.
Yeah.
Diamond Dave.
Well, they call themselves the corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Right. That's printed in the scriptures.
So I'm kind of mulling this over because I can, at least from the outsider perspective, I see both sides. On the one hand, I haven't heard the lay ministry argument. Yeah, when I joined, I knew that like mission presidents and people got paid. I was told that actually by members. So on the one hand, okay, it's kind of odd to have half and half, in my opinion. But on the other hand, I'm also struggling to reconcile with the fact that other churches are not open with how much money people get paid, and not just
they are.
not.
Yes,
I've been to many Christian churches. None of them have done it. I've been to several Hindu temples. One of them's in Minnesota. They do not release the private salaries of people. So if there are, then cool. But I'm just kind of curious as to why it is that, and this is more of a culture question, but why people who have left the Mormon church want this transparency, but people who leave other religions or even other denominations of Christianity who do the same thing don't. Does that make sense?
Well, do the other Christian religions say that they work for free?
Do
they actually say that to their congregation for decades?
We need to make a clarification here.
Sure.
Between just going to a Christian church and being a member, a voting member of that congregation. If you just go because it's a Christian church, you're not an official member of that congregation. Once you become a voting member and an official member of that congregation, you are privy to the financial papers
Interesting.
of that church.
Yeah, because when
Okay.
they lose a pastor, they have to find a new pastor, and they have to make
That's
an
right.
offer to make it lucrative enough for a pastor to move to their area or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This
So
is
not
why I
just-
like calling in, because I learn stuff all the time from you
Yeah.
guys. So I appreciate it.
So not just going, but you have to officially join that congregation. Once you've officially joined that congregation, then you're privy to it.
Right.
I
Okay.
went to a Christian church for a
So-
while with. And
Yeah, I would say that, when I first heard that there was salaries for the upper, or at least what do you call it, stipends, or however they called it, and that the leaders of the church could be making 10 times more in the private sector, and that made me feel okay, right? But I still felt the sting of all my life up until I was 50, felt that they sold all that they had and gave it to the poor and followed Jesus and helped run the church, but not all that they had. But they were wealthy enough. They if they worked, they had what do you call it, from pensions. They had Social Security. They had retirement. They had investments, and that they were living off of those things because the Lord had blessed them with those things. So when I heard that it could be up to $200,000 per general authority or whatever, that seemed, on one hand, kind of steep for.
I had always understood 30 years ago, 35 years ago, that mission presidents were called because they could afford to leave their profession
right,
and
exactly.
sustain them. Maybe they had their costs covered, but they weren't given a salary or a, what do we call it here?
Stipend.
I'll just say
an
that
allowance. Yeah.
I would have been a lot more faithful if I knew that I could have quadrupled my income someday by becoming a mission president. And quadruple is more like 10 times my income. But anyway, should we move on to the next one?
Well, if
Yeah.
you're 40 and single now, you can go on a mission.
There you go. I would love to be 40, single, and become a mission president.
They just want free labor.
I mean, I will say before we move on that I'm 35, and if they'll drop down to 35, I'll rejoin the church for $240,000 a year. That's fine with me. Like,
No,
hit me up, guys. Like,
No. You have to.
Doing it. Nope, you're doing it as a missionary, not a mission president.
You have to pay them. You have to pay your own way.
Yeah.
As a missionary.
Missionaries.
well, I know that about the missionaries. Someone said mission president, and I'm like, hey, 240,000 to be a mission president. Sign me up right now.
There you go.
These are missionaries, male only.
Can't blame me for trying.
President Diamond Dave has a nice ring to it, I think.
I like it.
Sure.
I like it. Okay, the next document is from the 1840s, and it is known as the Happiness Letter. This was a letter which Joseph Smith wrote to Nancy Rigdon, the daughter of his counselor, proposing an improper relationship and instructing her to burn the letter after she read it. This is there are phrases in this letter that general authorities have repeatedly quoted in conference and in books and articles, but they never give you the context. And I think when we understand what was actually happening in this letter, and we get a deep dive into Joseph's morality and his justification for his actions, I think this is a very damning document. Tim, why don't you get us started? What do you think?
Okay, what you're showing is the copy. That's a handwritten copy of the letter from John C. Bennett's History of the Saints. I'm guessing that this is in history book A1 or B2 of what will become the 7-volume history. Dean Jesse, who I had 2 classes from, and I talked about this letter, and he is positive, and he knows more about Joseph Smith and his writings, I think, than any other human alive, that Joseph Smith definitely wrote this letter, and it's real. And yes, it has been misinterpreted and misused. And last time I was in a meeting 20-something years ago,
Dean Jesse.
Where they talked about it, where he wrote the whole letter on the board, And I said, do you know what this is about? And I told the brother, and he had no idea that it was about polygamy. Just about happiness. No, I told him, shook him up a bit. So yeah, it's a great letter. Glad that John C. Bennett preserved it. And
I always felt good when they would quote it and say, happiness is the object and design of our existence, right?
distance. Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Then I got married. No, I'm just kidding.
What were you
No,
going to say, Carrie?
Touch that.
I mean, and Joseph Smith wrote this as a married man to a future hoped for wife.
And he had, what, 25 or 30 wives by this time, too.
Right.
Yeah.
I find this this letter very problematic because we can see Joseph Smith's morality. He doesn't. I'm no philosophy major, but he doesn't base his morality on the actor or the action itself. It's more the results of the action. And so in this letter, he discusses how that which is wrong under one circumstance may not be wrong under another. And it would lead to our enjoyments, which is, I think, what he was after. I think it shows him as a predator.
And Mormons say that morality is completely objective. That
Right.
absolutely wipes that out. Morality is relative.
Yes.
But
right.
this letter is objective. Subjective.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of this letter, Diamond Dave?
You know, I there's so many different angles I could go with this, because this is I've heard of the happiness letter. I've heard it referenced. I did not know that aspect about it, right? About the improper relationship. However, and please humor me, this may be a stupid question, but recently on Netflix, I saw Murder Among the Mormons with Mark Hoffman, who forged everything and under the sun. And even to this day, the FBI still doesn't know that there's forgeries out there.
Right.
How do we know this is not a forgery? Or has this already been proven somewhere?
The
that he wrote it?
language. Dean Jesse told me the language in it is
The language?
Joseph.
Okay.
The
I'm going to have to
language.
read this on my own time
Yeah.
then.
Language
We
and
don't-
handwriting.
And there
Well,
were
no.
contemporaneous entries into people's diaries, right?
There's no handwritten copy of this.
No, but
Anyway.
there's references to this. I mean, the,
Yes.
It was published in the 1840s by John Bennett.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's like proven already. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Cool,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to the next one?
Of
Sure.
course. This is fun.
Okay. All right. Document number 5 comes from John Taylor. It is a revelation he received in 1886 as the government was putting pressure on the church to stop polygamy. And in his revelation, the Lord tells him, how can I revoke something that is everlasting? And basically, it makes the idea that polygamy will continue. For years, the church tried to deny the authenticity of this letter, but experts agree it is John Taylor's handwriting. And it is the justification that fundamentalist sects use to claim that they have the priesthood and that they have the right to continue polygamy. This is,
And I'll say there's no
extremely
sex as good as fundamental sex.
Oh my God.
Tim, what do you know about this document? What do you think?
The first time I saw this was in a Fred Collier book, Unpublished Revelations of the Church. And I read it and I talked to people about it. And yeah, it's real. It's a revelation he received, recreated, we should say. He was in hiding when this happened.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
He was in, where was he? Can't
He was
remember
probably
where he was.
wearing a dress at the time, wasn't he?
I don't know.
He used to dress in disguise as a woman to avoid
yes.
authority.
Yeah.
That's interesting that he said it would never be revoked, and yet the very next prophet revoked it. And
Yeah.
Taylor and all the Mormons in his day, just 20 years earlier, said this is the absolute celestial law. You ain't making it without
Yes.
this thing.
This
Yeah.
must have been a really good letter because it took not one, not two, but three revocations of it to actually
No,
finally
four.
impact.
Four.
Oh, really? There's a fourth
The
one?
1890, was it not? And there was another one in 1904, 1932, when J. Reuben Clark wrote the final kibosh to end polygamy. So, yeah.
Hey,
That was
Gene,
basically
this might
four.
be a good segue to recommend to viewers and listeners the dialogue article by D. Michael Quinn about post-manifesto polygamy. It's a long article, but if you've never read it, it's like 95 pages or something. It is a mind-blowing story, and it to me it exposes the hypocrisy like nothing else.
And that's in Dialogue, a Journal of Mormon Thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you send me the link, brother John,
link-
I'll
the-
put it
I-
in the-
The
Yeah.
link's in the chat. I just put the link in the chat. Gene,
Very
you'll
good,
see it in
because that's all free. That's available online right now.
there. Oh yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It is
Well,
absolutely
everything Michael
incredible.
Quinn wrote's long and incredible.
I agree. This
Yeah.
was very problematic for my faith crisis because the narrative I had been given was the Lord gave a revelation, stopped polygamy, and the leaders told the church they had stopped polygamy, and they told the government that they had stopped. But over the next couple decades, hundreds of polygamous sealings occurred. And if that's not authorized in my book, that's adultery.
Well,
So-
and they occurred up to the 1920s.
Yeah.
There's a very important book on that subject. This is the first one, Richard Van Wagenen,
Yeah.
Mm.
that I
Mormon
read on
polygamy.
polygamy, Mormon polygamy history. And the part of this book that absolutely blew my mind was after the revelation, for 10 to 12 years, the saints were instructed, hide deeper further in southern Utah or go to New Mexico. And if you really have to, go all the way.
Mexico.
To Mexico.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
They
right.
kept doing it, and then they perjured themselves in court saying they had given it up. Yeah.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
is kind of reminiscent of, so again, not aware of this, but just the being brought up that fundamentalist sects use this to say they have the priesthood and they could still do polygamy, but the LDS Church says they have the priesthood and polygamy is over. This is kind of a reflection of my struggle when I joined, coming from a Hindu background, to a Christian denomination, whatever you want to call it, because in Christianity, people point to the same text. They claim authority and then claim everyone else is wrong. But that's not the case in Buddhism or Hinduism or anywhere else. And so for me, it's like, well, which one of these people are right? And they can't all simultaneously be right. So in my case, I'm just like, no, no.
It's not that they don't have the priesthood; they don't have the authority to
Yeah.
perform plural marriages, even though we know they do celestially.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of like the greater whole. This is like one smaller aspect of just the greater, Christian group A points to text and says that this is the truth and they follow it. And then they denounce other Christian denominations and there's this internal struggle. And that's just something that I can't resonate with.
What's
I
so
met with
problematic?
polygamy.
Yeah, what's so problematic to me is that 1890 manifesto is this statement to all of the church, right? This is like, okay, we are ending this. We're telling the government we're ending this. But in secret, the very top leaders kept doing it and authorizing it and participating in it, to the point where even, I think it was the president himself, went to the San Francisco Bay onto a boat into theoretically international waters to marry a polygamous wife. that to me, that's the tell of what's really going on. That's why it's so upsetting.
Right.
And I did.
Go ahead, Tim.
I did talk to Rhea Coons. She was a polygamist. She lived in near Point of the Mountain, Draper. And I went and talked to her one day, and we talked about this. And she told me that she knew of general authorities, bishops, and stake presidents that were still practicing polygamy in the Salt Lake Valley.
Side.
Yeah. So
Really?
they do it in secret. Yes.
I think the last official polygamist man died in the 60s. That was church sanctioned marriage.
Yes, in the 60s. But she claimed that they were coming to either the Allreds or the Kingston group or somebody, I don't remember, to get sealed because they recognized that they had the authority and that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints no longer had that quote-unquote authority. They had the priesthood, but they didn't have the authority to do it. It was like a temporary commandment, right, for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but not for the polygamists. So,
Right. And to me, this document from John Taylor speaks to a larger problem, which is that, now that the Joseph Smith papers are coming out, the Wilford Woodruff papers, Brigham Young's papers, we realize that growing up in the church, we've seen a lot of prophecies, we've seen a lot of revelations, and then there's a lot that existed, prophecies made in the name of the Lord that we never heard about because they're so damning, because they were failed prophecies or revelations which were just, for example, I came across in Wilford Woodruff's journal, he received a revelation when he was down in southern Utah that he should go to the temple and gather the brethren and offer, make a prayer roll and write the names of government officials and offer prayers of damnation, bringing curses of being deaf and dumb to their enemies. Well, if that's a real revelation, put it in the manual and let members just chew on that and figure out what they want, but this selective sharing what prophets have said, if it looks good, if it worked out, but kind of hiding the others.
That sounds like witchcraft almost to me. Just like from an outsider's perspective, it just, I don't know. Yeah, it just sounds like witchcraft. Like, let's all gather at one spot and then curse these people. It's like we did that in high school. Like,
that's right, Diamond Dave. It's
like
Dustin, you're being Mormon.
Seminary.
Like, Mormon, if Korihor can be made deaf and dumb, and if that was a real thing that existed in the world at some point, why not the church's leadership be able to do the same thing?
Actually, Hellfire Agency appears to be in the chat, and I commented on it because he was talking about it and saying Korihor was struck deaf and dumb. And I'm like, wait a minute, is that like a metaphor? Did just, whoever he was talking to get mad at him and like break his jaw? Like, I mean, because in that time you couldn't set it, so you couldn't speak, right? That's kind of what I was thinking.
It was miraculous, not physical.
I mean, if there are police around, sure, but like, I guess.
That's right. I've heard the priesthood called the laying on of hands if you want to go and beat up a bunch of people.
Well, yeah, that's what I've suggested before. It's like, hey, if there's an abuse problem in the church, let's anoint them with oil and lay on hands in a dark alley with no witnesses. Done.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our next document, number 6.
Yes.
What we're looking at here is Joseph Smith's 1832 journal. That is his own handwriting right there. And in this, he gives his very first person account of the first vision. But if you notice in the bottom left corner, there is tape, because this was ripped out of his journal, locked in a vault or a safe for decades. And only when the Tanners started harassing the church saying, we know you have this document, we know you're hiding it, did they bring it forward. And it's damning because the details do not match later accounts of the first vision, including who Joseph saw and why he went into that grove and when he found out or realized or came to the conclusion that none of the churches were true.
And not only that, in the original Book of Mormon, there's a certain description that God and Jesus are the same, and then it wasn't until it was corrected, right, when God came unto Mary or something, and she gave birth to the son. It wasn't the son at first. It was just Mary gave birth to God, right? I think, or something like that.
Yeah,
Whatever the
basically,
changes are.
yeah, all of the documents that Joseph produced in the first couple years of the restoration show him believing in one God, not two separate beings. Tim, what are your thoughts about this 1832 account of the first vision?
This is not a journal. I've
Okay.
been mistaken. This is from a letter book. This is written in a letter book, and Joseph Fielding Smith cut it out and hid it in his safe for years.
It was referred to as a strange account.
A strange account, right?
Yep.
And I've read it, and it goes along with Charles Finney, other people who had the same types of visions. David W.
Contemporaries
Patton,
of Joseph.
contemporaries of Joseph. David
Preachers.
Patton talks
They would
about.
write it down and publish it abroad.
Yep, same type of thing.
And that
So
was
it's
like
no
their
diff-
call, just like a Christian now says, I've been called to the work, and I want to become a
Exactly.
pastor. If they had an experience and wrote it down, it'd be about the same.
So it's no different than any other Protestant evangelical vision.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I like in it Joseph talks about how he has already concluded that God's church doesn't exist on the face of the earth. And then the constructed Madison Avenue version that comes out in 1838, we'll say, says that he never knew that this could be that there's no more true church on the earth.
Yeah, it hadn't even occurred to him.
Yeah, it hadn't even occurred to him.
Right.
Yet in his own handwriting, he says, yeah, it doesn't seem like God's church is on the earth.
Yeah.
Right.
On a related note, I'll just ask BYP or Tim, and this was an early shelf item for me because this is discussed in Bushman's Rough Stone Rolling. When did members of the church even hear about a first vision story? When did that even come into the minds?
When the Messenger and Advocate was published. It was in the public.
I thought it was about 1834 or 1835 or something.
Yeah, about then. Right. Yeah, Messenger and Advocate is. And there was Elder's Journal and then the Messenger and Advocate. Oh, Times and. Let me see. No, not.
And I think it wasn't even part of the missionaries.
Are you guys all on the page? I can't see any of us.
I can't see any of us either.
I'm just seeing the document.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we're all still hooked in. Okay, all right. It's all good. Sorry. I just wanted to see your lovely...
This issue seemed an impossibility to me. How could the church be formed? And not until 4 or 5 years later, the issue even come up as to why the church was formed.
Oh, interesting point. Yeah.
Oh.
And like I was saying, I don't even think missionaries told anybody about this. They only just said that Joseph Smith produced the Book of Mormon and therefore he's a prophet.
Yep.
Oh, they didn't use the
wasn't
first
part of
vision
like
account.
the discussions until like the turn of the century, and and then
Exactly.
1920.
Hinckley made it the cornerstone, the very pinnacle and beginning of Mormon theology, and that
Brother Brown,
the first 125, 30 years.
I mean, Mr. Brown.
Right.
Well, I know that my grandfather in Denmark in the 1860s was told about Joseph Smith, and the first vision was mentioned to him. But that's all that I know. So they did teach a little bit.
And then I think there was an article written in like the Improvement era or something in like 1970 by was it Dean Jethye or was it somebody else? Do you recall that, Tim? And so I remember being
Well,
gaslit.
Paul Chessman was the one who wrote about it in his thesis at BYU.
The
And
thesis, but in the
Jim
60s, in the
Allen-
mid 60s.
Yeah, and then Jim Allen and Milt Bachman. Jim Allen did his thing on the first vision, then Milt Bachman published his book that had most of the accounts of the first vision in it.
But whenever I would hear something like this, they would say, well, this is just, all that he could remember at the time or something like that, So anyhow,
what I find important about this document is that it's the baseline story, and as he retells the first vision story, it becomes more grandiose, more physical, more details, and that's not how human memory works. And I feel like we're seeing myth making as it unfolds.
Exactly. We're ritualizing history.
Yeah.
200 years from now, Joseph Smith would be another Paul Bunyan if we would have kept that up.
Right.
No, he's Jupiter. He's Jupiter.
Jupiter talisman he had, I know.
Actually, he's Dionysus.
Yeah, Dionysus. But
Did we already get Diamond Dave's input on this?
I'm just kind of taking this in because my joining sounds very fundamentally different than the average person. I was fast tracked in because what had happened was I reached out, met the missionaries, and they kind of touched on this maybe a little bit, or at least just the first vision in general. But after like 2 or 3 meetings, because I was already pursuing promotions in Utah, North Carolina, and a couple other places, because I was able to see so many connections between Mormonism and Hinduism, literally after 2 or 3 meetings, they went to, I think it was a mission president or the bishop, or they went to someone who's like, yeah, this guy gets it. Can we baptize him? And then they got written permission. I was baptized. And then 3 days later, I was on the road cross country to move from Minnesota to here.
wow.
So I don't know if I really have anything to offer this. The first vision wasn't really, a lot of the theology isn't a thing for me. The reason why I stopped going, and I told a couple people like Rebecca Biblioteca about it, other than some personal spiritual things I'd say that I don't want to share publicly, I just stopped because I couldn't make it reconcile with what I believe and my background and my worldview, so to speak.
And how to treat your fellow man or whatever?
Well, I mean, that could be debated, but I mean, like, just in general, because it's like, I couldn't really graft it on to my Hindu way of life, and it's clear I didn't fully understand the faith, I don't think, and the missionaries, they're young and they didn't know any better either. So I don't think anyone's at fault. In my case, I just, this doesn't connect, so I'm just, I'm done kind of a thing. But it is interesting to hear your guys' experience on it. So thanks for letting me call in and hang out anyway, because
I think the first time it was used in missionary discussions was when I went to Germany in '73 with the rainbow discussions. I don't, because they had before that they used the flannel board and talked about the apostasy and stuff. I don't know how much of the first vision was in there, but I know that we had to memorize, I still know it by heart, a lot of the Pearl of Great Price history of Joseph Smith.
Yeah, that was essentially the first discussion. Yeah.
That was
before. Oh, go ahead.
What's your question?
Oh, my question, just real quick before we move on. What's a baseball baptism? Hellfire Agency threw that up, and I'm like, I don't know what that is.
We believe in celestializing sports too.
Okay. Back in the 1960s, the church was in great financial distress, and Henry D. Moyle came up with this idea in England to form baseball teams, basketball teams, and for the kids to play on the team, they had to get baptized. So they did it without the parents' knowledge, and it was just to increase numbers. That's all it was.
There's actually a dialogue article, Diamond Dave,
Yeah.
I could send you that explains this whole story.
Yeah, you could set it, because I was called like the golden investigator because I reached out to them. I wasn't, I was in the Minneapolis, well, not participating, but I lived in Minneapolis during the Floyd riots. But I mean, I wasn't like in a bad state of life. I was a branch banker. I had a college degree, and I reached out to them and kind of got railroaded pretty quick through the process.
You would have. Wow.
So I think it's called like a golden investigator or something. It's like, yeah, this makes sense.
golden.
I'm on board with this. When can we do this? And they're like, I'll call this person right now. And yeah.
So
You made him believe in miracles.
real quick, Diamond Dave actually brings up a very interesting issue that sort of separates the generations here. I think back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, doctrine mattered. That's why people joined the church, because of the doctrine. I think the case could be made that over the last 20 to 25 years, that the church is really a lifestyle company now, and it's more about lifestyle than it is about doctrine.
Oh, nice insight. Yes, sir.
I'm gonna have to reflect on that, but I've noticed that just with my situation real quick, like it was, I think the bishop or stake president paid my way out here. Like he paid for a one-night hotel stay and a road trip personally. He's like, look, I want you to have a better life than what you have now, no matter what happens. And then he paid for 5 nights personally at a hotel near the airport until I could find a place to stay. And that's how I ended up in Provo.
Wow.
And then even between going inactive with my following and just having ups and downs in Provo, people have been really kind. So I don't know if some of it is duplicitous or, it could be, but I have met quite a few people who are just really, really kind in the process. So that's an interesting dynamic.
Either really nice, or he wanted to get you out of his state as fast as possible.
Well, joke's on him because he wasn't from there, but guess what? I went to Richfield High School, so
There you go.
No kidding.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing about
Let's go to the next one.
should we go on to the next one? I was going to say something, I can't even think of what it was.
Oh, it's train went off the track.
Let's keep the show rolling.
All right,
Okay.
we are looking at the SEC, or the Security and Exchange Commission order between the U.S. government and the LDS Church, which came out in 2023, which makes it clear that the first presidency was implicated in financial wrongdoings that resulted in millions of dollars worth of fines to the church and their law firm and to their investment firm, Ensign Peak. This information was essentially hid from members, but when it came public, there was no accountability other than the church admitting or saying, we consider this case closed.
Yeah. They paid the fine and then said, look, shut up, we're done.
Okay, and I'm going to call a halt for a second because I finally remembered what I was going to say. It has to do with the baseball baptisms.
All right.
I know of 2 times where people had to go and excommunicate the people who didn't know that they were members of the church, because at the time that's the only way they knew how to remove people from the records. And D. Michael Quinn had to do it in England in the 60s, and that caused him to lose his faith for a whole week or two until he was actually an ex-Mormon for 2 weeks, I think, and then he just decided the Lord works through flawed people or something like that. And the other is, I understand that Jeffrey Holland went to like Chile or Argentina and did about the same thing in the 70s or 80s or something like that.
No, that was the 2000s when
They had to reorganize states.
Early 2000s, Holland went to Chile for a couple of years, and Oaks went to the Philippines. And I have direct experience with that.
Oh boy.
So anyway, that's just what I remembered that, and so we'll go back to this.
But then we had Dale Murphy and Wally Joyner to bring all the lovely baseball people back. So
there you go.
Oh boy.
I'm just really glad that whole 2 weeks was spent in contemplation and reflection. All 2 weeks of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So one thing about this Securities and Exchange thing that got to me was I think Mormon Stories invited lawyers on the show, and they talk about how the agreement that was entered into and the fine, it was all agreed to. It's a negotiated settlement, and everything in the settlement got approval from the church to say that. And so, and if you think about it,
nobody should be afraid to read this document. It's about 9 pages, and it tells a story very clearly. It's not hard to understand. It is plainly obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a TBM brother who said,
go ahead.
I have a TBM brother who said, well, the church should do everything it can to prevent money from going to the government.
Yep, I've heard
as if
that
this
too.
was a tax thing. I said, it's not a tax thing. It's a matter of keeping the Securities and Exchange honest. It's about buying and selling with full information, right? Not hiding who the buyers and sellers are and who owns things. And so he didn't say anything. He just still felt that the government's bad.
Yeah, I've heard that too, and I've heard also about the shell companies, and I think this is very cut and dry. It's just interesting to hear the different kind of approaches on both sides, because when it comes to this item specifically, it appears in my anecdotal observation that the only people that really care about this are people that have left the church, and maybe a handful of quote unquote progmos, as the more orthodox members will say, right? But like just being in Provo, being around members, they're just like, yeah, it was a fine, we paid it whatever, like it's the government, so I've heard the same thing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So
Exactly brainwashing in action, man. They just don't see the significance of this.
I will say,
Jews would do.
I will say, and I'll gently push back on this. I don't know if I go so far as to say brainwashing, and that's mainly because people care about things that impact them directly, right? So if they see a news article about a company they shop at or a company they invest in, and they do something, as long as it do something bad and then they pay a fine, as long as they're not impacted personally, I don't see, even people outside of the church caring about similar situations, if that makes sense. So I personally wouldn't call it brainwashing.
That's fine. That's what it is.
What I find problematic about this document is that, the Doctrine and Covenants has a system for bringing even high up church leaders into disciplinary high council accountability, and yet we didn't see that happen. And if a lay member made an equivalent mistake that resulted in the wasting of sacred tithing dollars, you can bet there would have been discipline. And so this is just really hypocritical.
Yeah.
To me. Yeah. Well, let's move on.
The other thing that goes along with this,
the other thing
that goes along with this is in the new member discussions, which I don't know if Diamond Dave had, there's a lesson on honesty. And it says that you could be dishonest if you don't say something that you should to somebody. Mm-hmm. And so here the church is teaching people to do things a certain way, and it's do as I say, but not as I do. And that's...
I don't think we got to that point. I'll be honest. I don't think we got to that point.
There you go.
There is an incredible.
You were too eager to join.
Well, it was less of me being eager to join and more just being like, yeah, this makes sense. I mean, I'm with you so far. And then they floated the idea. The last one I remember was talking about like the plan of salvation, which is like the second or third one. And they were talking about the primordial existence, going through the veil, coming to earth, and then going to the heavenly, the heavenly kingdoms. And I just pointed out this is the caste system. This is Varna's, the heavenly parents, all of that. And that's kind of what started it all.
And usually what happens, Diamond Dave, is that once you get baptized, instead of going to the general priesthood meeting of the general Sunday school, the missionaries will have another set of lessons that they'll go over every week. Usually the ward mission leader teaches it, and it's a way for the newer members to learn some basic things. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, anybody else have anything on this?
Yes.
I was just going to say, go ahead, Tim.
The fine was $5 million, and there is more to come. The IRS and the SEC are looking at some other things that the church has done. So this
right.
is
There's more shoes that could drop. That's right.
There's
and it was $4 million for the Ensign Peak and $1 million for the church, which really means the first presidency.
Yes.
The 3 members of the first presidency.
And
they hid this even from the Quorum of the 12.
Right.
If that sounds like a small fine, look at similar fines for similar violations, and they're like $10,000,
$10 to $20 million, $10 to $20 million.
The $5 million is a very large fine given this issue. I just want to add, there's an incredible speech that Dallin Oaks gave to the law school about 8 ways you can be untruthful and be okay.
That was a mind boggler, wasn't it? You kind of go, wow, you're teaching them how to lie. Wow.
Wow. Okay, ready to go on?
I'm ready. Thank you.
I want to be TK smoothies. So,
all right, here we have a photograph, but in the photograph we have President Hinckley, President Kimball, examining a document alongside
Elder Hoffman,
professional forger Mark Hoffman. Now, I don't know if this is the salamander letter, but that's the document I want to talk about.
That is the Anton transcript.
Okay.
Thingy, yeah.
Well, the reason this to me that this photograph and the document or documents that the church purchased from Mark Hoffman are significant and damning is because it proves church leaders do not have discernment as they examine documents and assume they're legitimate, and as they stand next to a killer, they're unaware. And it also shows, in the case of the salamander letter, that they are willing to purchase something with sacred church funds and hide it to continue the narrative. And finally,
incorrect.
Okay,
incorrect.
Correct me.
Steve Christensen bought it and donated it to the church. The church did not buy it. What the church does in cases like this is they ask a rich member to buy it and donate it to the church.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what Steve Christensen had been doing.
Yep, that was in the Murder Among Mormons. And if I could jump in, the first time we're going to all universally agree, as an outsider looking in, watching the Murder Among Mormons on Netflix, I will say this is damning from an outside perspective, because even before we got out of the first episode, Mark Hoffman kept like, hey, I found this, and I found this, and I found this. Within the first 20 minutes, I was wondering, who the hell is this guy, and why is he the only one finding anything? That made no sense to me. Even as someone in like collectibles, I used to be in like trading cards. If someone would come up, hey, I got this rare card, and I got this rare card, I'm like, and how are you getting those? Where are those coming from? Who are you? Like, basic questions.
The damning part of this photo is the seer stone changed its shape and color in Kimball.
Had he just been using the Joseph Smith seer stone, he would have maybe figured it out that it was a fake.
Yeah.
I'm surprised nobody else figured it out, because in that whole series, everyone's like, yeah, we were greedy and we didn't want to think about it and blah, blah, blah. But the thought, but to me, it's like the thought never entered their minds in the first place.
The Tanners figured it out.
Yeah.
They did, and on Rob's note about what they're interested. This whole story also shows how incredibly invested and interested the top leaders are in the the relevant documents that relate to the founding of the church. That it's absolutely critical. In fact, if I think about it now, the church has probably spent, with all of its, over all of these years, they've probably spent into the hundreds of millions of dollars on finding and preserving and archiving, cataloging early church documents.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that is one of the more. I remember this was one of the issues that began to crack my shelf when I brought it up, and I said, well, the brethren appear to me to be deceived. I was on the private email list of FAIR, and we were talking about it behind the scenes back when we had just started with FAIR. I remember saying, well, it looks to me, I mean, I even asked, why didn't they use the seer stone? They said, oh, sure, come on, get with it. And I said, well, this is one of those that I'm not going to worry about too much. Now I've got absolutely every book ever written on this subject. And I am going to do a series of videos on it once I take about 6 months and read all that literature. The stack goes about, 1.5 foot high. There's a lot of stuff that's been written on it, but quite the telling situation. The son of Satan deceives the prophets.
Yes. So where do we want to go with this?
Does it merit top 10 documents?
Yes,
Definitely.
Absolutely. Hoffman merits the top 5, in my opinion.
I don't know enough. From what little I know, I'd say this would be probably top 3.
Ooh.
Because just again, like I said, someone never familiar with the church watching the Netflix series, if you watch it in the first episode, within the first 20 minutes, it's Hoffman. He just comes out of nowhere, starts hobnobbing with the bigwigs.
Yep.
That just screams like red flags everywhere.
Yeah.
This is the photo that Boyd Packer wished he had never jumped into.
Yeah, right.
Well, and this would lead to, President Oakes, our soon-to-be prophet, writing and speaking in defense of a salamander in order to just turn the narrative to incorporate all of these falsities. And
not just Oaks, but Farms.
Yeah, Farms jumped right on it.
Bob Smith was the one who did all that research.
Oh, Robert Smith. Yeah, he's a hoot.
Now, let's talk about Mark Hoffman did find one authentic document. He found a John Taylor diary that BYU Studies published, and that is the only authentic document he found. He forged George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, Mary Baker Eddy, the Oath of Freeman,
Agatha
Smith, maybe Agatha Christie.
Yeah,
we don't know to this day. In Victims, there's a list. There's like 100, 200 pages of everything that they know that he did. But the reason he wrote, Mark had a plan. Okay. I had a friend, Scott Morley, who was on a mission in Pennsylvania when Pinnaker was his mission president. And him and his companion were told to find the lost 116 pages. So they were up in northern Pennsylvania, and their job was to go to antique shops and ask people when they're out tracting, do you know anything about it? A lot of people have heard the story, and they were trying to track down the lost 116 pages. Of course, they never found them, but that was when he was a missionary, him and his companion, anybody that was in that area, basically that was their P days. That's what they spent their P days doing. So Mark Hoffman forged Martin Harris's signature in a hymn book and 2 or 3 other places. And then he forged the salamander letter. And his plan was to forge the 116 pages.
Mm-hmm.
When I went back to Missouri to MHA, Dean Jesse gave a presentation. Mark was there, Lynn Jacobs was there, Brent was there, Brent Metcalf. I was there, the people were there. And Dean showed all the Martin Harris signatures. And there's only 2 authentic, if I can remember right, there's only 2 authentic, really real Martin Harris signatures. And what he would do, he would go and he'd find the Niles Register was published like since the 1700s. And he would go find a book and he'd cut the end sheet out and use that piece of paper to write his forgery on. That's why the paper, when it was sent to Livermore and they tested the age of it, that's why the age of the paper is correct. But the iron gall ink was wrong because the paper was as old as it's supposed to be. So his plan was to forge.
That's what
pages.
comes out in the documentary.
Yeah.
Or the murder among the murder among the Mormons.
Yeah,
No,
that was an interesting documentary.
There only needs to be one thing wrong that proves it a forgery.
And
And
I have
that's
met
a lesson we can all learn.
I have met Throckmorton and the other guy, and I had an experience with Mark when I was doing my research on David Patton. I got a call from Lynn Jacobs who told me that he had an elder's license signed by Marsh and Patton that he wanted to sell me. I was a poor BYU student. So no, I can't afford it.
I'm going to send you on an assignment for our show, Tuesdays with Tim. Go to the prison and see if Mark will talk to you and then give us a report.
There you go.
California. I'm not going to drive all the way up there.
That's right. I forgot.
Mark. No. So,
I want to ask real quick to Carrie and Tim, you were probably aware of 85, 86, when all this was happening. I was completely unaware of it. I was really too young. Gene, what about you?
So I actually got married in 1983.
Okay.
But I had dated this spring of that year at BYU, we'll say, around the campus. And so.
But it was a national story. And
so
it was huge. We talked about it every day and every Sunday as soon as the bombs went off, and started talking and all. And when the salamander letter stuff came out, I was the elders quorum instructor, and I stood up and told the elders quorum, I said, I really like what Farms does, and I brought the defense of Farms on the I still have it somewhere in my mess of the salamander letter, and I said, this just doesn't work. These are fake. And they all got mad at me. They said, no, this supports was right. Narrative. And I said, no, it does not. There was no salamander there, man. I don't believe this.
Before MHA, I was visiting my parents in Colorado, and I got on the plane in Denver to go to Independence. And the first people I saw was Gerald and Sandra and Mike Marquardt, and then everybody else from MHA. And Gerald handed me the thing he did, and I was reading it on the airplane. Okay. And we get to Independence, and we do our meeting. And I spent most of my time with two other people touring the countryside, going to the historical sites. But
it's an interesting story, that's for sure.
I met Mark as Ernest Strack ran Grandpa's Books. I met Mark there, and we talked. I met Lynn a few times. I never met Flynn. But something bothered me about Mark from the very beginning when I met him. Like you said, it was very unusual for him to find these things when as a historian, I know how hard it is to find and pull stuff together. And all the hours I spent, I went every Tuesday and Thursday for I worked in the BYU archives, and I spent every Tuesday and Thursday just about for 5 years going to the church archives doing research. So I plowed through hundreds, thousands of documents, and I know how hard it is to find information. And when he was coming up with this, that's what bothered me, was how could he find these things?
You're just jealous because he was inspired and you weren't.
Yeah, right.
Well, I gotta ask, because it's like when the documentary talked about the salamander letters, and the church leaders kind of went with it, but then there was also the spokesperson that said, we'll accept the findings of the FBI, but that does not mean this is not a forgery from that time. There's a disconnect here, because you would think anybody in the church would just be like, no, this is not real. Like, there's nothing in here.
Very few of them did. Very few of them did.
So why did the upper leadership, I'm genuinely curious, like, why did the upper leadership just not double down on the faith and went with it?
Because of the stuff in Mormonism Unveiled in E.D. Howe's book talked about a toad, and Mormonism, Its Layers and Designs, and one other book have references to Joseph seeing either a salamander or a toad or something that turned into Moroni.
Yeah.
So he just took those ideas and expounded on them.
Yeah.
So they knew the stories were out there.
Yeah.
And
I thought he just made it up, because in his interview he said
he was using historical stories from earlier in Mormonism. Yeah.
Okay, because I remember him saying something about seeing something about a toad somewhere, but it's like, no, I'll put in a salamander, but I didn't know the toad turned into Angel Moroni and all that. So
Yeah.
never heard that before, so I don't know what to think.
The truth shall set you free. Hey, who's that dude trying to hide under the desk? Tell him to sit up. Yeah,
Joe.
Let's get through our last two documents, and then I'll.
All right.
That's a godless Korah whore, Joe.
I want to see the. Oh yeah, this one.
Right.
Woohoo!
This is John Whitmer's characters document, which purports to be Reformed Egyptian pulled off of the Book of Mormon. Tim,
my bosom is burning.
Maybe it was Reformed School Egyptian.
Some people say
source.
What did you say, Carrie?
We know the source of these documents. We know the source of the characters.
It's the gold plate.
Yeah, obviously. Everyone knows that.
Magic books. They came out of magic books.
They actually, Dan Vogel's done a lot of stuff.
I've sent you guys, maybe not everybody, but I've sent people the document that Art wrote up about the characters and where they came from, and their variations, like from the Magus and the Sixth Book of Moses and other ceremonial magic books. These characters came out of these books.
Yeah.
My friend Heidi Love, who runs the Unfiltered Rise podcast, it's a conspiracy theory podcast. That's what she calls it. I'm not naming things here. But she says, but man, you get that girl talking about how often Enochian alphabet and lesser keys of Solomon show up in Mormon documents, man. She'll talk your ear off. She's awesome. Yeah. That's pretty cool stuff.
As someone who does gaming videos, these look like nothing more than squiggles to me.
Skeptic.
Yeah, excuse me. Wow.
And
you might want to go to a doctor to get that burning bosom check there.
I'm gonna go
down your intestine
now. Somebody. All right, Rob. What else you got on this?
It is definitely not Reformed Egyptian. Okay,
definitely not Reformed. There is no such thing as Reformed Egyptian.
Yes. Okay. When I was a kid and I would do my math homework and I would get to the bottom of the equation and have the wrong answer, I remember my dad would get so mad at me because I didn't show my work. He's like, you got to show every step. How did you get to this conclusion? And this document, the grammar and alphabet of the Egyptian language, is Joseph Smith showing his work, how he pulled characters off of the papyri and produced the Book of Abraham text. And to me, this is extremely damning because experts agree it has nothing to do with, Egyptian, with the characters. He's making it up. Tim, what do you think of the Gale?
Of the what?
The grammar and alphabet of the Egyptian language.
It's a great document. It's a fun document to go through and read.
It is.
But he's not the only one that did that. Excuse me. I had a copy of an Orson Hyde letter. Orson Hyde?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
Willard Richards' letter, where he drew them on the side. And Wilford Woodruff. They all drew these characters on their letters on the side.
Aha.
So they copied them from this, basically. All the ones that were in the School of the Prophets that did the alphabet and grammar knew these characters, and they would write them on his, I think in Wilford Woodruff's diary.
Really?
There might be some. Yeah.
Now, then, in the just Exmo Joe here from Hellfire Agency, author of the Core Horror Argument. How you doing? The apologist argument on this is that is obviously not Joseph Smith's handwriting. Therefore,
Well, it's not. It's not.
Yeah, they've got that part right, but that doesn't mean he wasn't the one dictating it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it true, though, that Tim, that back then Joseph and others thought that one character could produce many ideas that would translate into sentences or paragraphs?
Yeah.
Well, there's your evidence right there.
Joseph Smith wasn't the only one doing this, though. There were other people out there doing the same thing. So this is not unique to him. It is unique with the characters, but it's something that other people did also.
There wasn't that an examination of the Adamic language, Tim, that they were trying to work on?
Adamic language. You got to remember that the Champignon stone was found in 1803, I think it was, and by 1816 it gets translated into French. By the 1820s, it's into English, and it comes to America about 1820s, 1830s. So we're just getting the beginnings of Egyptian. And the only reason they could translate that Rosetta Stone is because they knew Greek. Otherwise, they would have never figured out what Egyptian was. But he wasn't the only one doing this kind of stuff. I think it's a gas. It's fun to read.
Well, he's the one that got the translation correct, though. Thank goodness.
That's right. He got the translation correct.
And I think to Robert's point is that this, in a way, proves, like what we talked about for the very first document of this series, this episode, is that it can't be syncretist, inspired work.
Catalyst, yeah.
No.
There can't be a catalyst theory. This shows that they tried to work it out.
All the theories that Muhlestein and Guy and the others come up with, they're all bullshit. They can't deal with the reality of it.
Yeah.
I
read
Exmo Joe's virgin ears are burning right now.
Oh,
How
sorry.
dare you? This language, this salty language.
That's his Pferdscheiss. Okay, it's Pferdscheiss. It's horse shit.
You know what my boss used to say? Son of a mother pig's butt.
Let me ask Carrie and Tim this question. How did Hugh Nibley steer clear of all this, or did he?
Oh, you need to read his article in
Kirtland Egyptian Papers.
Yeah, you need to read his article.
Yeah, that's the most confusing. That's the most confusing thing there is.
Is that in one of his books? Is that in one of
No,
his books?
BYU studies.
Yeah.
What about the book by his own hand on papyrus?
Yeah,
that's the title of the freaking book.
That's one of the best books out there on the
That's
Polygamy
this
price.
one right. That's this one right
A
here.
man- that's
Yeah,
one of
that
the best
one.
books out there, and a man who draws
But
those
but
shirts
but
are
the
so
update to
nimbly.
the update to this, which is vastly superior, is Robert Rittner.
Everybody should watch Robert
Go ahead, show
Rittner.
us again, Carrie. Show us the book
Yeah,
again.
yeah, this is Larson by his own hand. And I'll tell you what's fun about this now. Look, when I was an apologist, I read this, and then I read John Gee's review of it, and I took John Gee's side. Once I got clarity from Dan Vogel and Robert Rittner, I went back and reread this book, and it's like the scales had fallen off of my eyes.
You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Yes,
Yeah.
Gee carped on small, minor, almost utter irrelevancies and never got to the point. And Larson is one of the clearest, most straightforward shots. It's incredible. But the crazy thing is, when you're on the inside of it, you see this document up here right now. And Rob, I agree with your selection here. That's a that's the Vogel book.
That's a good
That
book, yeah.
that is one of the greatest books. That clarified. But Rob, I agree with you here, brother. This document is important enough to put up here in this top 10 without question. Great choice. Simply because the apologists and the church at large, and you'll never see this quoted or talked about in general conference. The church leaders don't even want you to know this exists. That's why they want to destroy it, I'm sure. But
it wasn't until the Tanners published it that
exactly,
people really know about
yeah,
it.
yeah, it had never seen the light of day. Sidney B. Sperry was trying to get him to, and it's no, it's in the vault. Yeah.
Yeah, so somebody gave the Tanners all of the Joe Smith paper microfilm, and they just published it.
Was that you, Tim?
No, that was before me. That was before me.
All right.
No,
Can I just speak for a moment in the defense of the good, scholarly, academic, the man of intelligentsia that is John Gee? Why are we laughing? Why are we
We
laughing?
apologize. It was the intelligentsia
My
bullshit
Lord.
that got us.
I didn't say, don't laugh. I didn't say Mulestein. Good Lord. All right.
I like this guy. Let's have
Bring
him
him
on.
back.
So one of my favorite quotes about the Book of Abraham from any apologist, though, is from John Gee. You've heard it before, and here it is. We shall repeat it again for our viewers at home. Through the magic of television, which is a thing only boomers say. This is a quote. It will probably come as a surprise to many that I do not have a testimony of the Book of Abraham. The word of Gee. The word of Gee.
Yeah.
Which of those two, was it one of those two that said that they start with the conclusion?
Yeah.
Milstein.
Yeah.
Milstein.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He outright admitted his confirmation bias and his method.
Right. Yeah. I start with this conclusion and I make everything else fit.
Now here's what's crazy, you guys. I so promise. I mean it. I'm really serious. Is Mulstein is serious. He can't see the problem. He's on the inside. I couldn't either. It's impossible to describe. But when you're on the inside, you really think you have the truth and the right interpretation. I read Nibley's message of the Joseph Smith papyri 12 times. I knew all the answers. I had it. But the minute
I saw it, Carrie.
You're doing the Lord's work.
I saw it even on the inside.
yeah.
Of course, I never wanted to be an apologist, so.
Oh, well, you had brains. I didn't. Yeah.
Well, my father used to get upset at me for the questions I asked. So.
Yeah.
Why are you asking that question?
I just want to say this because I hopped on and this is all kind of new to me, as we've established, and all the, the papyrus and the first thing that we saw, the Reformed Egyptian, all this now. I don't know what to make of it other than, with 17 million members and $265 billion in assets, at least, Joseph Smith, well done. If he could do that off of this, I am legit impressed. Like,
there's only
That's right.
2.
That's where I see Latter Daily Digest in 200 years.
I can't even like, I understand people who leave, and there are those who have had really traumatic experiences, but in my case, I can't help but be impressed that all of this culminated into an
Let me just
empire.
explain something to you. If
I-
you had
I
read,
can't
if you had read,
with that.
if you had read
There's
To Young Men Only by Boyd K. Packer, you would not have such positive feelings.
There's only 2.5 million active members. Let's tell the truth.
Okay,
Like
2.5.
15% that
Still,
are
that's more
active.
than I have. Okay.
All right,
And
true.
and 2.5 or 3 million of those includes the the secret lives of Mormon wives.
Mormon
Yes.
wives.
And
Yeah.
the prognos, the liberal Democrats, and the bastards, and all those.
Yeah, that's more swingers too than I have right now as well. So still, like,
It involves PMOs and
PMOs,
Listen,
yeah.
Expos,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
church that I'm starting, 2.5 million is the number of swingers alone. That's just where we start.
okay, all right.
Hey, can we be the quorum of 7?
We're,
Here, this
Sure.
Yeah. All right.
We
Seven
make up whatever you
presidents
want.
of the 70.
We're the presidency.
We're the president.
So
Let's go, big, go home. Yeah.
I'd like to
feel-
know. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
I was just going to make another joke and say I feel like Creed from The Office, where he says, "I've been both a leader of cults and a follower of cults. You have more fun as a follower, but you make more money as a leader."
The leader.
That is one of the best creedisms ever, and I quote it all the
I just
time.
came here to hang out, and now apparently we're starting our own cult. So here we go, I guess.
It doesn't get
Well, now
better.
wait a minute. I'm selective with who I bring into my cult. First of all, I want to know how many of you are swingers. We'll take care of this after the meeting.
Hey, if
But,
you come hiding down by
All my
half,
ancestors from 2 million years ago were swingers. That's all I know.
all right.
That's right.
The king of the
Hey,
swingers,
I'm
yeah.
trying to
The
make a
jungle VIP.
presentation.
Hey, Rob,
Well,
tell us about this last. I mean,
The last thing I'd like to do is ask you, gentlemen, what documents do you think should have made the top 10 list but did not? And then I have a few suggestions that are written on the thing to include the 1826 Bainbridge trial documents where Joseph was arrested for treasure digging.
Okay.
DNC 101, which prohibited polygamy and was on the books while they were practicing polygamy. I also think the Nauvoo Expositor should have made the list. And maybe the Times and Seasons where they denied polygamy in writing. What are some of your suggestions for documents that should have been on the list?
I'm
I
a
don't
little
think
surprised that the Book of Mormon didn't make the list.
There you
The
go.
Book of Mormon copyright sale revelations, that is a very important one. That actually is at least 11. That's real close to the top 10.
I don't think you could have done a better job picking. the
I don't
top
either. I think your choice is fabulous, man.
What
For
is
me-
the name of the book that there was the name of a book that people were talking about that like Jody Hildebrandt had, the Frankies had, the Valos had, something
Visions-
about.
Visions
Visions
of
of
glory.
glory.
Visions of Glory.
I call it.
I'm kind of
Virgins.
wondering if that should be on that because I haven't read it, obviously.
I have
But I'm hearing a lot of people just picking it up, reading it, and then going batshit insane.
Yeah,
And I'm wondering if maybe that should be
Glory.
somewhere.
Versions of Gory.
I think on this list here, the document that has had the most impact on the culture and mind of Latter-day Saints over the past, since 1959, is obviously Bruce R. McConkie's book,
Mormon
Doctrine.
Mormon Doctrine.
That influenced all of us,
Yeah.
no question.
Okay.
I was a little
Number-
surprised, and I'd love to know what those experienced historians, think of this one. For me, one of the most damning is the minutes of the excommunication proceedings of Oliver Cowdery. I mean, that are now in the Joseph Smith papers. I mean, the fact that I don't think I know a Mormon, frankly, who knows that story of what exactly Oliver Cowdery was kicked out for, and you know how
did
Todd,
he part from Joseph? Yeah,
and how Todd Compton can have read that document, and I know that Todd Compton must feel very conflicted about this. I'm not trying to pick on the guy, but how you can know about that document and believe that Joseph Smith obviously must have married Fanny Alger at some point. We just lost all record of it. I mean,
why don't you, for the audience, describe that real quick? Give us the background and the reason why you're saying what you're saying about it.
But
a lot of the audience may not understand that.
There was a Mormon discussions with Don Bradley that really tied that down.
Really? Yeah. I was curious if somebody would mention the Don Bradley thing, because that's like a whole other thing. Okay. But real quickly, so the excommunication minutes of Oliver Cowdery's excommunication in absentia, where he testifies basically by letter, is where the origin of the nature of this claim that he said that Joseph Smith was guilty of a dirty, nasty, filthy affair that was described alternately in other documents as a scrape, and so therefore was not an affair. Obviously. And I just find it laughable that in the end, if you read the document of the minutes of the excommunication of Oliver Cowdery, because he was excommunicated for a lot of things, they brought various charges against him, primarily stemming from the fact that he sold his house, which you wouldn't think is such a crime, but it is if you're living in communism. When you're living in communism, in communism, property is theft. I mean, and he stole his house and then went and from what I understand, hung a shingle to be a lawyer in the next town over. He had abandoned the cause, but the fact is, at the end of the day, he was found guilty on all charges, including the charge as listed in the minutes is that he had accused Joseph Smith of adultery. And so, I mean, a scrape or an affair, adultery, I don't think that there's a lot of room on what adultery means in 1838 versus now. So I'm curious what the apologists think.
1834, 33, 34. Yeah, it was Missouri. It happened in Missouri, right?
Right. It was in Missouri, yes.
Yeah, 1830.
That was, it was 1838.
Was it?
Hate to correct you there.
That was earlier than that.
Something just struck me a little bit on point, but that breaks. That's interesting you bring that up, because that breaks biblical canon, right? Because I've been to churches before this church, and the whole theme was when someone like David committed adultery or someone else committed a sin, they were remorseful, they were punished, they were redeemed. But in Joseph Smith's case, it sounds like he committed a sin, he booted out the guy who accused him of committed a sin, and then he continued to keep on sinning. Yep. Because that fits because that breaks the biblical canon, it cannot be biblical canon.
Yeah, and every time one of the women either tried to get away from it or refused him, or some of his buddies that he tried to bring in on it, he immediately began calling those women whores, sleazes, sluts, vicious.
Is that written down?
Yes, he lambasted him, man. Yeah, Sarah Pratt and several other women that he tried to have an affair with and marry in plural marriage. When they refused him, man, he turned on them.
That's why Joseph Smith made a good presidential candidate.
Yeah, really. He would have.
Exactly.
He would have won tonight.
It was April 1837.
Well, his little brother looks like he's going to win.
Right. April 1837.
Joseph Smith is a great guy. I like him a lot. He's been one of my favorites.
Believe me, I know what I'm talking about.
He made a church. He's got $300 billion in assets. You don't get that easy. It's not easy.
Wow. Wow.
Of this list, though, I think number 11 would be the Clayton Diary.
Yes.
Clayton diaries, yeah.
Clayton.
Hey, let me ask you a question. Put the
Pictures.
hold on. Let me. Yeah, I've got this. Hold on. Put me on the big screen for a second. I have a really important.
Oh no! Oh no! Don't do it!
I'm
Don't do
scared.
it!
We
This
don't
is-
want to see
this
that.
is a
We don't want to
family
see it.
life.
I'm
This is a
scared.
family life.
I need an adult.
Not
I'm
for
gonna
my
put-
Ah!
I'm
Here,
trying on
here are a lot
stage.
of good documents.
No,
I
that's-
can still see
that's
it.
a good- But I've got a question on a more important one.
Okay.
This
Let me
one.
try to get you.
I've been told that the Clayton journals, the William Clayton journals, have not been published, and yet I have this. Is
Okay.
this
What you
this
have
is
there?
by George D. Smith? What is this one then?
Some of it was published. What's in there is Andy Ehat's notes
Okay.
for the 1842, 43 stuff. Is Ehat's note? It's not complete. It's missing a bunch of stuff.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Yeah,
You
okay.
could be missing some good stuff.
Come on,
Because,
Carrie. Come
because
on.
Well,
this
according to
will blow your mind, man.
according to Mike Quinn, Joseph Smith was having sex 3 times a day, and Clayton was the one setting up the appointments, and it's in his diary. That's what Mike told me.
I gotta make friends with this William Clayton guy. Jesus.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
He would make a
For
good
my money,
secretary.
the most damning book, the most damning document to come out of Mormonism is this trash right here. This is the Korahor Argument, A Missionary's Journey Out of Mormonism by Joe Rollins. I mean, just trash, but interesting.
The shameless self-promotion.
That's fine.
Nice segue.
Nice. Love it. So my last question I had for Tim or Carrie is why do you think it is that you were able to look at these documents and incorporate this new information and shift your perspective and your allegiances where others, John Welch, Carrie Muhlstein, they can't do it?
Because I've been exceedingly blessed. I'm not even being facetious. I don't know. I don't get it. Because I was as faithful as Jack Welch was. I was as faithful as John Gee. I was as faithful in church and all that. I truly don't get it. That's one of the mysteries in my life. But I am very grateful that I was able to get to this point at this time. Not that I've arrived, but in my journey, I feel like what happened is, and I know this, I apologize in advance. This is going to come across as condescending, and I sincerely don't mean it, but I am really grateful that I have been able to been given the ability, the chance to broaden my mind, because that's what I've always wanted to do. When I was 11 years old, I said, I will never be bored in my life. I'm going to learn something new every day. And I have not failed in that. So I don't know why I was able to see the shift. I don't know why I had that shift. Like I say, I just virtually memorized everything Nibley wrote on this topic. All of the farm's materials, I could outquote all of you combined at one point in my life because I just read it nonstop so that I could be a really good apologist. And then along comes, actually what happened is I began studying the biblical scholarship. That might be part of it. Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah.
Is then I saw the biblical scholarship, and I remember asking the fair people, hey, how come we aren't writing that good stuff? I mean, they're quoting the Greek and they're quoting the Hebrew and all. Oh, well, Nibley is. No, us, Mormons in general. How come we don't have the Greek and Hebrew in Sunday school and all that? And that started
Somebody say,
to see the
Nibley is all Greek to me.
It's Greek to me too. But maybe it showed the shallowness of the approach. I don't know. But how did you get your shift, Tim? Because you were deeper than I ever was.
It was my upbringing. I grew up in West LA. I had Jewish friends, I had Protestant friends, I had Catholic friends. If you ever go to the LA Temple, the Ohio Chapel is right behind the temple, and right next door is a Catholic church and a Catholic school. And I go to Mass with my friends and go to church sometimes. And I go to Hebrew school with my Jewish friends, and I went to Baptist school with my Baptist friends.
That's because there were no video games back then.
We had Saturday morning cartoons, man.
And
Lone
they hadn't
Ranger in the
invented.
afternoon.
Never mind. I am
So,
curious if you knew.
wait,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
and I've
Keep
always
going,
been
Tim.
curious. I've
Keep
always been very curious in my life. I always want to know why. My father really used to get upset at me because I would challenge things and authority and stuff, and because he wasn't comfortable with that. And I read the 7-volume history of the church. I knew about footnotes, and I knew how things were assembled from documents. And I often wondered, okay, what's behind this? Because when I read B.H. Roberts' history and I read the 7-volume history, and I go, there's got to be something behind it, that they're not showing or telling us. And then when I got to go to church archives and I got to dig into the documents, and that's a rabbit hole and a half.
Yeah.
So I was always looking, and I had cognitive dissonance. And I was trying to put it all together. But I had things happen to me spiritually that I thought it was the same thing, but I've had them ever since then too. Same thing. I've seen things before they happen. I have a second sight sometimes. Feelings. It was a gradual thing. It wasn't one thing. It was just everything adding up.
Me too. Yeah.
Till
Yeah.
I finally figured out it's all garbage.
Yeah. It all just kind of came together one day.
Yeah.
When I was in leadership positions and they wouldn't listen to me and wouldn't do the right thing, wanted to do
Tim,
this
was that
or that.
was that before you got? Did you get excommunicated? Right.
Well, that's
For
another
sharing
story.
documents.
Yeah, they tracked me for 10 years on the internet. They tracked me through Genie, then AOL. And
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, my bishop warned me a couple of times. 2 bishops warned me. Stake president never said anything, but I know he knew. But yeah, they warned me to say, my mother went to school with Benson's son and Monson and these other people, and they were friends. And I mentioned that Monson knew my mother knew each other, and somebody called the church up. And the next Sunday I go to church and my bishop says, what's this about Monson? My mother went to school with him. She knew him in school. That's all I said. And then I go to a regional conference in Palm Springs, and Monson's there, and he makes a statement that I knew was directed at me about him. And I'm going, man, crazy stuff.
I'm so tired of being compared with Tim Rathbone. I'm told
I want to.
that we are friends.
So what's your question? What's your question for me?
Is that me you're
Well,
talking?
before you say that, Exmo Joe, Carrie and Tim both just hit on an important thing that I just want to bring out. I think in this experience, there's I think it's this idea that something tells us that this formula we were given from birth isn't working out properly. It's this A plus B equals C. It's not. There's something that doesn't quite right. And I think the key element in causing this change is, and this is how it was for me. It was I finally just had to sort of, you could even say it, humble myself and say, could I be wrong? And as soon as I asked that question, could I be wrong? It's like, I'm just going to look at everything and the world opens up. It's just an astonishing, it's traumatic. There's no question it's traumatic, but it's like, I'm going to rely on my own intuition, you might say. Could I be wrong? And then
Logic.
that causes the shift. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is what I was trying to touch on earlier, and it all stems to, with everything going on that's been discussed tonight, why do some people leave and why do some people stay? And I think we all kind of touched on it in our own way is, our personal lens, our upbringing, our experience, right? One of the reasons why I never mock people in the church, I never bash the church, and I never will, is because I've met many people who are just good, average people who have had powerful personal experiences in their lives. And when they see these documents, they're like, well, I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not this. I'll let them deal with it. But it brings me and my family closer. But on the flip side, somebody else in a different perspective, they may still be, you're all great people, and good people in the church ask themselves a different set of questions because it's not working for them. And then that's why they leave. And I think, in my opinion, and I might get some flack from this from someone somewhere, but just outsiders in, I think both positions are valid. And I kind of take the more Eastern approach of I take people's experiences for what they are. Their feelings and sensations are valid, whether I agree with it or not, whether they choose to stay or choose to leave. And I think I can learn something from both sides.
Sure.
That's true.
pretty
You
good.
can learn something from
Maybe
both
that's true.
sides. Yes.
I think that the
Okay.
major difference, though, Dave, is that you're not looking at a person. I'm just going to go ahead and speak for everybody. I'll play Oliver Cowdery in this situation here. I'll speak for everybody.
Excommunicate him.
Kick him out. No, wait, we were kidding. Come back, Oliver.
Can't get me twice, baby. All right.
Now you're bragging.
Hey, I mean, if what I heard is true and Oakes becomes the prophet next, he might.
Yeah, he'll rebat just to
I got-
excommunicate you again.
I got my plans put together
Okay.
for that, and Gene knows about that. But here's my question: I was asking is for Tim and or Carrie, is Jack Welch? Is this? This
I
has been
work
like the
with
most
Jack.
interesting. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm asking. Well, let me just get my question real quick, if I can.
Okay.
So this guy invented this idea, basically, that there's chiasmus in the Book of Mormon, verifies the Hebraic poetry / narrative styles in the Book of Mormon. He's been pushing it for 60 years since he invented it when he was a missionary in Germany. And it does seem to me in the things I've read lately, and I'm curious if I'm just making this up. You know him personally, and that's why I'm asking. Does it seem to you like Jack Welch must be smart enough to know that this whole chiasmus thing doesn't pan out, that even inside the Hebraic form, the Book of Mormon doesn't pass muster with its chiasmic structures? And that's why I'm just
Okay,
asking
let
that.
me answer that question from my perspective, and then I really do want to hear what Tim has to say. It has nothing to do with is he smart enough. That's irrelevant. Now, that's the image that the Mormon apologists want us to have. Look, even smart people can believe this, so therefore it must be true. It has nothing to do with smart. It's like I was saying, though. There's no other way to describe this. You almost have to live through this to get this. They can't see it. To Jack Welch, that is such a personal part of his life experience where he influenced Bible scholars. I mean, world class Bible scholars with this chiasmus thing. And one of them told him, well, it's proof that the Old Testament is true because it's a Hebrew literary form. He went on, and I was just looking for it. He went on to produce a book, Chiasmus in Antiquity, that entirely undermined that whole argument. Chiasmus is not just Hebrew. He found scholars, and they contributed to this book, And he has since found scholars, including Mormon scholars, who have found chiasmus in Mesoamerican texts, in the Popol Vuh, who have found chiasmus in the Doctrine and Covenants, who have found chiasmus in the Book of Mormon, who has found chiasmus in Dr. Seuss, who has found it in Moby Dick. It is in the ancient Ugaritic literature. It is in the ancient Mesopotamian materials. It is in the Egyptian texts. It's not Hebrew. It doesn't confirm the Book of Mormon being ancient.
Does that mean it's ubiquitous?
You can't see that because it built so many testimonies, mine included. Oh my God, I gave firesides on chiasmus. I was finding them right and left. I found chiasmus in the witnesses' testimonies. But if you're that invested, and he got blessings from the general authorities to spread the word. Oh, the Book of Mormon's so true. Thank you, good brother. When you get a general authority shaking your hand, looking you in the eye, putting his arm around you, and saying, man, are we so grateful the Lord has sent you to us and keeps you in the church.
Tim Ballard felt like that.
You can't walk away from that. So no offense to Jack Welch. He is way beyond me in intelligence in some subjects, but he can't see it. So there's no fault finding, but he can't. He's been shown. I guarantee you he's been shown, but he still can't see it. And that's it's kind of a lousy explanation, but I'm using my own experience. You can't see it when you're on the inside. Tim, you take over, Chief.
Jack has an ego.
Yeah.
He wants to be a GA. Okay.
Yeah. Story.
I wrote that Book of Mormon translation paper. Most of it
I've got it still, Tim. That's how
and whose first name is on that paper?
Yours.
No.
Jack Welch.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What does that tell you? I did the research. I wrote it. He puts his name first. He
So
can't
if
see
history
it.
had changed, we would have Jack Welch on, and you'd be still waiting to be an apostle.
Can I ask you about that? Can I ask you about this, about the language model, usage to try and improve that it couldn't be, that the chiasmus couldn't be accidental, basically, which I didn't really understand that as being a major part of the question. But go ahead.
I don't know that much about chiasmus. I didn't talk to him that much about my goal was to do the chronology and write about it and pull everything together. That's what they hired me to do. But he can't see it. There's people in the world that can see things. There's people in the world that can't. I mean, there's basically 4 personality types, and depending on your personality type, when you finally figure things out, you're going to see it, and it's just going to be like a boom moment. And
so
he's too steep into the church. When they're invested like they are, sunk cost fallacy. They can't see it because it's their life. I mean, it was my life for a while too, but then when you see the cracks and when a lot of things go wrong, and I knew of things that happened, that things weren't taken care of, that I called anonymous pep lines to get them taken care of because leaders weren't taken care of. I mean, we had one family in the church, the guy was molesting his children, and I found out about it, and they wouldn't do anything about it. Then after I left, after I was excommunicated and moved away, my kids, they arrested him, and he's up in wherever. He's in prison for the rest of his life.
Well, so we could talk a little bit more, but at first I would like to thank Rob again for coming up with this idea for a presentation.
Thank you, Rob.
That was wonderful, Rob. Really true.
This is amazing.
I agree with your choice of documents too. That's sharp. mean,
I do have a question because this is kind of on the back of my mind because I'm not familiar with this individual, but I trust him when he says that this gentleman has an ego. This is his life. General authorities are applauding him, praising him, maybe even paying him. What if it's not a matter of he can't see it? What if he knows and just doesn't care? Is that a possibility?
That's a possibility.
That is an option, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's true with all of them. I know for a fact, Dan Peterson has been shown the fatal problems to so much of his evidence and arguments, and yet he's still believing, he's still writing the same stuff, he's still trying to present Firesides being the Mormon savior hero, so to speak. And I'm not trying to mock him either. He's trying to help people save their testimonies. And so he keeps bringing up the same old, tired, already totally refuted arguments that he uses in favor of the Book of Abraham. And he knows that
Dan Peterson,
and yet
Dan Peterson, Ron Prittis and myself were all in the LTM at the same time. Dan and Ron went to Switzerland. I went to Germany, and I could see things then with Dan, even back then.
Isn't there a statement or saying that there, how's it go? It's whoever's paying you. That's when your life
Yes.
depends on
Yes.
believing.
Cash bias.
Then you can't. Yeah.
That's Brother Jones' testimony of that they didn't pay him enough to stay.
They didn't pay me.
Frankly, Gene, that there's probably some truth to that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I think there also is.
It's a great
this
point.
is what I think it is that a lot of the upper echelon people think that the average ordinary Joe, Exmo Joe notwithstanding, thinks they think that they need the crutch of Jesus in order to survive on earth, and they are just helping people come to Jesus, and Jesus is the cure-all for the lower level people that are their lives are mundane.
Yeah, but the Mormons the Mormons take it to Jesus. The Mormons, apologists and scholars, I'm sorry, I know I'm going to offend some of them, and they'll probably even respond, but they do not take it to Jesus. I have that on personal experience and knowledge too. They take it to the Book of Mormon and the Living Prophet. And I know, I get it. I get their rationale. Well, the Book of Mormon talks about Jesus on every other page. It's totally a second testimony of Jesus Christ, etc. So we do take you to Jesus. No, you do not, because what that does is it takes you back to Joseph Smith, and then from there they tie you to the current living prophet. So I'm sorry, but yeah, I get your point, but that's not what they do, in my opinion.
Well, why would apologize? Go ahead. Sorry.
When I took a New Testament and Old Testament classes from a scholar from Claremont, that's when my eyes were opened about a lot of stuff too. Like Carrie said, when you go and you study the Bible,
it does,
and you realize how it was assembled and what was left out, and
Joseph Fitzmyer,
on a similar vein, it's like things that sort of cause us to see through the problems. Diamond Dave might appreciate this. Something that has always been interesting to me as I have seen a bit of the world outside of, I say, the Western United States. You go to China, you go to India, you go to all these places around the world, and if you're honest with yourself as a true believer, you have to be honest and realize that 99% of humanity doesn't care about the church. They don't even know about the church. It doesn't even enter their mind. Okay?
Exactly. And like in my experience too, it seems like they're trying a little too hard And that's something that just I look at weird with not just the LDS Church, but kind of Christianity in general, because it's like we need to save people and send people to India and Thailand and Malaysia and Indonesia. But the difference is like you go to these cultures like Exmo Joe, I'm assuming you're not a Hindu, but the difference between me and, you know, like an LDS apologist is they will try and debate or try and prove themselves right, where I'm like, oh, you don't live a Hindu life? Okay. Like, whatever.
Yeah, good.
Like,
Well,
Good.
you've got
Good bet.
the people, the evangelicals, you know, are you saved? You know, this stuff. And like, what difference does it make? And
no.
I mean, you know, with missionaries, it's baptisms. With them, how many people they save? You know, like.
And then add to this element the incredibly moral people you can meet who are not Christian.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just don't really see
moral
why
moral by our definition. You know, what we would consider moral, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, these are things that really, in my opinion, force you to open your mind a bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Yeah. See, boy, I mean, that's a beautiful advantage you've got right there. I've never lived outside the United States. Crap, I barely made it out of Idaho for 2 years to Missouri on a mission.
Come visit me, Kerry. I'll open your mind a bit out here.
I would love to. I think my next vacation, I'm gonna come spend 2 weeks with
I
you.
gotta ask Brother Jones real quick. Where in Thailand are you? If you're comfortable sharing the city, and I will preface this by saying, because on Facebook, I have some friends who own go-go bars in Pattaya. And I met them on Facebook, and I've been promoting their go-go bars. And I'm like, yeah, I'll drop by and hang out. So I'm just curious if you're in that region or if you're more farther away.
If
you're comfortable sharing, if not,
I live in downtown Bangkok.
okay,
I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, that's all I really wanted to. Okay, I know a couple go-go bar owners out there too. Exmo Joe, you want to tag along? There's some pretty girls.
Offline. We can talk
I didn't
offline.
say anything about any go-go bars. All I was going to say is that I'm not really certain why any apologist would be careful about Jesus when they work for the Church of Mammon of Latter-day Saints. That's Exmo Joe from Hellfire Agency Podcast. Go to hellfire.agency.
And I'm Diamond Dave promoting go-go bars on an Exmo channel.
I need you two to be my managers. Would you do that? I need you to promote me, man.
We're gonna polish up your skills, Kerry.
Gene, your next project is to conduct a tour to Bangkok.
There you go.
You need a catchphrase, Kerry. You need to start saying, "Get in the yard." You got a problem? Get in the yard. The backyard professor, something like that.
I might steal that from you.
The grass is always greener in the backyard.
My problem is, I'm old school. I mean, I'm in my 60s. I can't think as sharp as you guys. You young guys are like a breath of fresh air, man.
Well, and I mean the trick with like that, and I think Xmojo, from what I've seen, kind of has the same vibe that I do, because there's a lot of YouTubers and a lot of promoters who do like explosions and like in your face yelling and screaming, and that's at least not how I operate. It doesn't work for me. It's just more of like, you look at my gaming videos, it's like, yeah, come hang out, elevate your music, chill. That's kind of more of my approach, and I think that fits better with what you guys are trying to do than Mr. Beast.
Well, I'm enjoying this group as much as any of them. These are becoming very, very pleasant. I mean, Rob just did a spectacular. Conan the librarian, thank you. He did a spectacular job.
More money for Tim.
Thank you.
This is our own little support group.
We're gonna go eat Thrive or Sunstone or something.
Tim gets more money.
Yeah. Well, I'd say the cult of
Okay,
genius.
there you go. Tim, you've been nominated.
Thank you, Conan.
I don't
nominated for what?
I have an office of vice president, do I? I thought I'd be more like the gatekeeper or something like that.
Who nominated me? Wait, what did he say?
He said, I
Oh
voted
my God.
for Tim Rathbone for president, PYP for vice president.
Yeah, we're gonna need to move to Thailand. You got some space.
Thank
wait,
you,
I thought-
Conan.
We
thought
promise
it was-
we'll make it fun.
Yeah.
I thought the going price for voting for somebody was $1 million a vote.
Mhm.
Could be.
Well, this
Oh,
was
man.
fun. Thank you
Oh,
for
look at
everybody.
that. Perth, Western Australia from down under. I love
Nice.
you. Australians.
Really?
They're the best UFO watchers there are, man. These guys are the real deal. I love
Wow,
them.
high power one. Wow. So
Carrie, I got to get Heidi on your show. Gina and I were talking about this earlier. My friend Heidi Love, I told her, I said, you should, I said, I said, what do you know about LDS Daily Digest? She says, who? She's an ex-Mo evangelical
Hey,
who runs a
Larry,
conspiracy theory.
Gene Judson, man, get the word out.
Yeah, that's I do it every day, man. I'm out here preaching the word of the cult of Gene. I'm doing it right now.
I swear Gene is doing witchcraft or something, because I've said this before, but Gene reached out to me on Facebook and he's like, hey, would you ever want to come on my show? And I'm thinking, you promote small content creators and I got over 115,000 followers. No, on Facebook. No. Like 2 weeks later, here I fucking am.
Here
Like-
you are. We love it. We love it. We
Yeah, we mostly love Gene.
will be assimilated.
Yeah, Gene, you guys are cool. You guys are cool.
You guys are
But
cool.
the thing that motivated me to ask that question, though, and I know we're trying to wrap things up about
No,
Jack
I
Welch,
like
is that they have a conference
Hook us
about.
up, Exmo.
They have a conference just for, as you know, just for chiasmus in the Book of Mormon, and they have
Really?
like Jeffrey R. Holland speaking at it, like it was just recently, and it was, not that Jeffrey R. Holland is impressive, but he's got nothing else to do. But the thing that was amazing is they got an attorney, I think is a member of the church. He seems to be well known, to come up and give the contrary position to the chiasmus. So he's got a cohort in front of all these Mormons about this, specifically about chiasmus, and gave just a knockdown argument. I mean, he almost looked apologetic. Like he gets up there, you can tell this guy is like a high power attorney, and he like gets up there and he just like says like, so the whole point of chiasmus is that by the time you get the reverse parallelism, you're supposed to have gained something insignificant and profound in the reverse parallelism, and that's not true about the chiasmus in the Book of Mormon. And I'm like, oh shit! And then,
wow, that's pretty. It's pretty.
I mean, I'm like, damn, what, just like that guy? And you can tell, like, Jack Welch is just sitting there, like, smiling, like, looking at him, smiling. And I'm like, okay, so either it's eating him up inside, or he's just can't even hear
I
it.
guarantee it's
That's-
eating him up inside.
Ah,
I
Well,
guarantee.
I don't know how I feel about that, because I don't know him personally. Maybe, because
Well-
like we all know how badly that cognitive dissonance can burn, right? I mean,
Yes.
to Simon
Yes.
Dave's point, every person in this panel was that person who said,
That's right.
look, it brings good things into my life. I believe my family is forever. I'm going to be reunited with my mom and dad, and I will ride on that a priori logic, unless, of course, something terrible happens, like turns out Joseph Smith was a liar or something. I mean, what are
Right.
the odds? I'm safe. And when you find it, when that cognitive dissonance, has been sitting there in the pit of your stomach for long enough, it hurts, man. The most cold-hearted cynic like me, it hurts. There's a grieving process. I tell people all the time, some people leave church and go to another church, and
Yes.
I don't besmirch any of them, or start their own church, which I'm finding more and more understandable. But I say, like, Mormonism burns God out of you for a lot of us who become atheists. It's like you burn out on it, and so it's like, and that largely has to do with when you have to hold that cognitive dissonance in your stomach for long enough, it just burns you up from the inside out. My opinion.
I'm
Yeah.
curious on the kind of the other end of the spectrum, because you mentioned being burned out, and that kind of goes in the concept I heard of the high demand religion. I'm kind of wondering how, because the church is expanding internationally, if it's going to have the opposite effect. Because before I stopped going, I was struggling to reconcile some stuff, and then the church time went from 3 hours to 2 hours. And they were changing some other stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute. If the church is true, why are we decreasing time? Shouldn't we be increasing time? There's not a lot of enforced standards.
You were golden, weren't you? Wow.
Yeah, well, and that was the thing because puja ceremonies can go 8 to 10 hours in a temple.
Right.
Muslims pray 5 times a day.
And the Mormon endowment used to be an all-day situation.
Some of us used to go priesthood meeting, Sunday school, and sacrament meeting at night.
Yeah. Like when I was
meetings.
Yeah. When I was active, I was in church, and then I did the Sunday school, and then I did all that. I did the FHE on Mondays, and then I went to my roommate's YSA ward for their get-together on Tuesday. I'm sorry, mine was on Tuesdays. His was on Wednesdays. There was something else going on Thursdays.
Yeah.
And, it was good. I enjoyed it, but I'm like, wait, it's only an hour long.
These were
what am I doing?
these were 3 separate times. You'd go to priesthood meeting at like 8 or 9, and then at 10 o'clock you had Sunday school, where you meet in the chapel and do sacrament. No, maybe no.
We did sacrament in Sunday school.
Did we? Okay, thank you. And then at night, 5 or 6, you have sacrament meeting where you have the talk. You did 2.5 minute talks for Sunday school, and then you break up your classes.
Right.
You go to priesthood meeting and you meet in the chapel, and then you go to your quorums, and then Sunday school. And then in the evening, you sacrament meeting, and that's when you had speakers. High councilman came every 3rd Sunday. That was a lot of church.
Yeah. And the way it is now, and see back then, that at least in my lens, that makes sense. But from an international lens, with things decreasing and being more, I don't know, user friendly, for lack of a better term, I kind of struggle with seeing it as a high demand religion just because of my experience. And that was one of the things I couldn't reconcile is, again, if this is true, should we not have more church? Like, I was advocating for 5-hour churches when they're like, oh, they may go from 3 to 2. I got everyone mad at me. Everyone was mad at me. And I'm like, wait a second, why?
They may go to 1 hour.
I remember as an apologist, I said, my gosh, what do you mean we're only going to meet together for an hour in this email list? Why don't we make it half of a Saturday? And they all just about killed me.
Yeah, exactly. I got flamed, and I'm like, wait a second. More church. This is good. We love church.
Yeah. I was the same dang way, actually, as an apologist. And, but now I'm the same dang way, just with great people like you guys.
No.
See, we're at 2.5 hours, and I feel like we just started, other than I took a, potty break here a little bit ago. But I could be because my age.
That's what that was.
Well, let's wrap this up and schedule another topic.
Let's do
good dynamics here.
Yeah, who's next to present a topic? Shall we pick now? Because Gene's got something fabulous going here with us. I think. Who wants to give a topic?
I think the spirit of revelation will fall upon me, and I'll call somebody to do a topic.
Okay. Cool.
If it's me, I might say no. It depends on my schedule.
You're not allowed. The spirit of revelation, you have to accept the calling, man.
Here's what you're going to do.
We got to get Debbie.
You can't say no.
4 years.
I try to make it because you guys are cool, and like I said, I like to learn from both sides and kind of throw in and ask some questions.
I'm planning a show right now. 4 years from now, when Diamond Dave is a 40-year-old missionary for the church.
Okay, first of all, it's 5 years. 5 years. I'm 35.
And able to do social media at the same time. He'll be the first missionary currently serving.
No, you know what? I'm actually on board. I'm on board with this. I'm gonna call myself to the go-go bars in Thailand. I'll be preaching there. It's just if you need me,
would be right there with you, right? Those are his kind of people.
I'm just going to state this for all those people out there with social media on their missions. Let me explain to you people what a missionary is. A missionary is a boy sitting there in his suit because his luggage was left in Lima when the plane that took him to Mojobamba and landed in the Amazon jungle and told him, "Oh, don't worry, I'll bring your luggage on the next flight out." And then the landing gear broke on the plane when it landed in the jungle, and had to sit there in his suit and in one pair of garments and in that white shirt for about 2 weeks until that man raised enough money to fix his landing gear to fly back to Lima and get my luggage.
Oh
And
my.
then you're sitting there on Facebook messaging with your friends from high school. Well, I couldn't talk to my mother but twice a year.
Right,
tell me you're missionaries.
exactly.
I will rejoin the church if I get a
knocking
lifetime.
on doors 8 hours a day, getting them
Oh, at
slammed
least.
in your face, getting a cop in Paderborn, a cop that hated the missionaries. Every time he saw us, he'd pull us over and razz us.
Naked Amazon Peruvian girls chasing you around
There's
from
your
place
next
to place. I mean, just
podcast,
horrible.
Gene.
Just horrible.
Yeah.
There's your
We used to
Gene.
dare each other who dared. We used to dare each other who dared put their foot in the door when they went to slam it.
Missionary stories, is that what you're saying is the next?
Yeah.
episode?
Talking to Nazis and hearing their
Because
war stories was
That
more
will fall
exciting.
right in line with the movie Heretic.
Right.
I will say
It opens
too.
tomorrow. It opens Thursday.
I will say
I'm planning.
too.
I'm going to. I'm
Oh,
going to
go
go
ahead.
see it probably Tuesday. I'm going to go see
I'm going on
Conclave
Sunday.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
Cool.
I will say too, real quick. I've been to Lima as well in 2005 with a high school missions trip from Grace Church of Eden Prairie. Since I play both sides, I'll make people an offer. Since I'm still technically in the church rolls, I'm a free agent. You get me a lifetime supply of Inca Cola, I will either renounce my thing or rejoin.
Because
Inca
Cola here.
Whoever
What?
There's a
the
restaurant.
highest
There's a
offer.
restaurant 2 blocks from me that sells Inca Cola.
Was it La Calieta? Because that's where
La
I get
Calieta.
mine with my. I'm in Provo.
I'm in American Fork. No, this
Okay.
is the one you can get it. You can get the Inca Cola that's bottled in Cajamarca.
Sounds
Is it
like
a lifetime supply and
you're a
free?
group.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Let's
Are you
thank
guys going
Robert
to
one
the
more-
tribe
one last
on
time.
Saturday?
Let's give Robert a few minutes or so. And
Yes.
Robert, let us know what you
close it
thought
out.
about our conversation tonight.
Well, let me have the final word and answer my own question about how it is that some people see these types of documents and make a mental shift, and others just can't seem to do so. For me, it started with a life coach podcast. Now, I would have had zero respect for life coaches, but a lady in my ward said, "Hey, this is a really great life coach. She has a podcast." It was called How to Deal with Difficult People. And it was about right at Thanksgiving time, when all the families and relatives came. And I listened to that and it blew my mind. And that led me on this journey of studying neuroscience and how the brain works. And I started learning about, bias, cognitive dissonance, logical fallacies. And I believe that I got into the church or stayed in the church for emotional reasons. And then I found rationale to justify, or gymnastics that would justify things. But as I started learning more about how the brain works and how my brain works, I realized that I was able to take a step back and look at myself and realize that whether it was the Book of Abraham or the priesthood ban or the LGBTQ policy or you name it, that in each instance, I was choosing the least probable rationale when all of the evidence, the preponderance of evidence, was stacked up against me. And yet I continued until my wife actually came to me and said that she was going to leave the church. And I, for the first time, felt emotionally safe to say, well, I'm actually in faith crisis. And but I think for me, to overcome that emotional connection I had to the church with a lot of difficult emotions and then being able to gain some self-awareness really helped me, as well as having a family system or a spousal system that I finally felt like it would be safe to question. I think that's
nice.
yeah.
That's very helpful.
I
I
really,
have that too.
yeah, I really enjoyed everybody's opinion on these documents, and that was a lot of fun. Thanks, Dylan.
I appreciate you guys putting up with me.
Oh yeah, we love all you guys.
We love you guys. It's good that you.
You're welcome
share.
back anytime except next time.
Whoa. Wow.
So anyway, we'll end the show right now. People, if we want to stay on for a little bit afterwards and say hi and goodbye and exchange phone numbers or anything.
Okay.
But thanks everyone for watching. There's 2 more months left in the year.
Groaning.
Great rest of the year. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care, everybody.